Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I would just like to make a comment to the extent a lot of you are here regarding AB 249. It's going to be quite a while until we get there. And I would just offer the suggestion that you can stay out in the fresh air and we would pause and make sure that you are notified when the matter's brought up, if you would like that. But I will make sure we pause and get outside and let you know, but stay near the building or alert people where you are. Well, because we have a lot of other people here as well. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and take roll.
Commissioner Adaro?
Here.
Commissioner Hatch?
Here.
Commissioner Hayward?
Here.
Chair Rumke?
Here. Okay, good morning, everyone. I would just like to start, to take a moment to thank staff for some excellent outreach efforts they made last week at the League of California Cities Conference here in Sacramento. As many of you know, that conference reaches out to about 400 cities and has almost 2,000 attendees. Executive Director Aaron Peth was on a panel entitled The Public Official and the FPPC, Silent Partners in Transparency, which was very well received. Thank you, Aaron. And also I'd like to thank Trish Mayer and Courtney Miller, who coordinated the booth at the conference, which allows people to come up, ask questions, share information, some hands-on demonstrations, navigating our website. Again, it was really well received. They led it and other staff helped as well. So again, thanks to everyone for their efforts in that. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to connect directly with the cities and the public officials and the clerks of those cities who we deal with every day. So thanks to everyone. We'll start with any public comment regarding a matter that is not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, we will jump right into item 2, approval of the commission minutes from August. Do the commissioners have any comments or corrections on the minutes?
No.
Commissioner
No,
O'Darrow.
No, go ahead. I'll cede to Commissioner Hatch.
That's all right. You go ahead.
Okay, so
Okay,
one of you go
fine,
ahead.
I'll go on. So I just want to make a comment about the minutes in general. I know that we have that there are recordings of our meetings on YouTube, and that obviously anybody can watch it. I guess have a question, Mr. Woodside. How long are these recordings stay? How long do they stay on YouTube?
Excuse me. As far as I know, there's no
Forever.
date where they drop off YouTube. So.
Okay.
And then we have backups of the YouTube tapes, and we have audio recordings of all the meetings, which are held indefinitely.
Okay, so to the, that's lovely. To the extent, but to the extent that people read the minutes, I think it's important that they reflect a little bit more detail about what happened. As I've been kind of looking over some of the past minutes, I find it really, I guess, interesting how the minutes are put together and what they reflect, because they're not as complete as I think they should be. And this is, Sasha, please don't take this personally. I know that this started well before you came on board. And it's not, it's just kind of a general comment that I think we need to be mindful of, that the minutes, for example, reflect that we ask questions. and we know that people answered them, and they don't reflect the answers unless they're a question asked by the chair, in which case they do reflect the answer, which I find quite interesting. I mean, if we look at the July meeting, Mr. Rios spoke a lot more than the 2 lines that are reflected. I asked a question later, no answer, but there was an answer. Mr. Hildreth spoke just as long as Mr. Rios. He got more than twice as much lines as Mr. Rios. Commissioner Hatch asked a question, well, that one has an answer. I asked another question, no answer. Commissioner Hatch asked a question, no answer. I mean, and then, you know, we closed the meeting. I had a lot to say, I admit. I probably got, I don't know, it was summarized into 4 lines. Chair Remke had a lot to say. Every single point that she made was summarized. So I think that we have to be, I would ask that we be a little bit more mindful of providing a more complete record. Even if I get that we can't get word for word of what's said, but it has to be more impartial than the way that it's structured, that historically what I've seen. So that would be the only comment that I have on the minutes in general. And I know it doesn't go to the approval of the August minutes, although we have to figure out what to do with the August minutes and the amendment that Commissioner Hatch had asked for as to the July minutes. So I think, Commissioner Hatch, were you going to make a comment about that, or?
That was my plan, yeah.
Okay, then I'll cede the floor to you.
Commissioner Hatch?
With reference to our minutes before us here for approval, there's a brief item about my motion to substitute a transcript that I prepared as an addition to the minutes. And you had indicated that you had not had a chance to look at it, and so I modified my motion to allow that you have time to do that, and assuming that if it's what you think you said, then it would go into the minutes, and the minutes would be modified. I don't see that in here, and I would have to ask, were those accepted or modified, or have they been added to the minutes of the previous meeting?
Yes, I reviewed them, accepted them. They were amended by Sasha, and they are finalized as you proposed.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. It would have been nice to had some kind of indication.
Well, I had suggested we bring it back, and that was declined at the last meeting. But I'll just, again, verify that I did review your suggested amendments, approve them. The minutes have been modified as such, and they're
Okay,
finalized.
thank you.
May I have the floor?
Commissioner Odero?
Thank you. So I pulled the minutes, the July minutes, a couple of days ago. Have they been revised and put up on the website?
The approved minutes are not on the website, but I do have them if you would like to see them.
None of the approved minutes are on the website, is her point. They're always what's proposed from the meeting before, if that's what you looked to, the prior agenda. We could perhaps put a portal on the website for approved minutes. We just never have had it requested. And if asked, it can be provided. But we can have a section on the transparency portal, I guess, of approved minutes or under the prior agendas.
So what I pulled up was, it says minutes of the hearing, July 27, and up at the top it says unapproved and subject to change, and it doesn't have what Commissioner Hatch had moved to have added to it.
That's correct. That was what was presented at the last, and not the finalized ones, which we just discussed, are not available on the website, but can be made available if that's the request. Or again, Sasha could forward the final ones to you.
Well, I think they should just be on the website for the public.
Okay. We will work towards putting all prior minutes on the website.
Well, it's more to the point, if the minutes were corrected, then what we display on the website should show the corrected ones.
Okay, again, to clarify, what is on the website is what's in your packet every month as part of the agenda, which are the proposed minutes to be approved. Then we go through it at the meeting. Changes are made, it's voted on and finalized. Sasha, as the commission assistant, maintains that record, as been the practice for the past 30-plus years. And so if requested by any member of the public or commissioner, those finalized approved minutes are available. We used to keep them in a binder, but we are trying to get away from paper, so everything's electronic. And again, that's been the practice. If the request now is to have that finalized approved minute packet on the website, we can do so.
I think that would make sense. I didn't read anything on the website, and perhaps I missed it, that tells the public how to request the final version of the minutes. So I wasn't even aware that that was a possibility. So that's why there was a concern on my part that what is on the website, in whatever form and for whatever reason, and for however many years, doesn't really reflect what happened.
So electronically, what we have here is that all of past corrections made over the years are, public's just basically in the dark unless they have, the fortitude to come in and ask us for paper, because there's no way for them to even tell that there were corrected minutes and what the content was. This seems crazy.
So again, we can go ahead and put the finalized minutes on the website.
For myself, I'd be in favor of that.
Okay, that's what we'll do. Any other questions or comments regarding the August commission minutes?
Well, I think after that, I would move approval.
Second.
Commissioner Darrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatch,
Yes.
Commissioner Hayward,
Yes.
Chair Rumke.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Okay, the enforcement consent calendar, Ms. West, and I understand you have 3 items you're pulling from the consent calendar, or pulling from the agenda, I should clarify. They will be pulled from the agenda.
Correct. I'll be pulling items 6, 8, and 11. Galena West, Chief of Enforcement. Sorry, you guys startled me. You finished so quickly. Okay.
So 6, 8, and 11 are pulled from the agenda.
Correct. We're happy to say we reached a settlement on the default that we were presenting at the last possible moment. So we're happy to report that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we will be seeing that step next month?
Next month, yes.
Okay,
We'll double check it all first, but yes.
Excellent.
Chair Rumke, if you'd bear with me, I'm trying to find my notes on the ones that I wanted to pull. I apologize.
okay, while you look for that, I'll ask the other commissioners if there are any items they would like to pull from the
Thank you.
consent calendar.
None, thank you.
I don't think I have any either. Thank you.
Let me know when you're ready,
Yeah,
Commissioner Hatch.
I apologize. I'm having a little computer trouble here. I usually email these things to myself, and I didn't have time this month.
It's our lightning efficiency again. It's catching people off guard.
No, I was sitting there and swinging my
Suddenly?
feet, and all of a sudden,
Okay.
You've got your curtain call. Here you are.
I think I'm getting close, closing in on it now. Okay. I had questions on item 3. Oh, I'm sorry, those were answered.
And again, this is not regarding questions, this is regarding items you'd like to be pulled from
Right,
consent.
thank you. Item 7, I think. Yeah, that's it. The rest,
Okay, regarding the remaining items on consent, do the commissioners have any questions for Ms. West?
I don't.
Nope, I don't either.
no, thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment regarding the remaining items on consent? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move the consent calendars, items 3 through 39, except for 6, 8, and 11, which were pulled from the agenda, and 7 that Commissioner Hatch.
Second.
Commissioner Darrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatch,
Yes.
Commissioner Hayward,
Yes.
Chair Rumkey.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Okay, so we'll take up item 7. Commissioner Hatch, if you'd like to start.
All right. In reviewing the STIP with reference to this item, this would look like a grassroots organization that was short on experience and long on enthusiasm. And from the factors that were displayed in the STIP, I thought that the fine was probably on the high side. And I know that these are done, conscientiously using comparables that they can find, but in the case of the stuff that they had put out, which was pretty, low budget, they had actually put website references on their materials, and so I think they probably thought they were complying, but they obviously were not. And so I would, on a longer-term basis, I would like to see that we could develop a policy where we sort of categorize these things, where we've got professionals doing it versus newbies or inexperienced folks who are not well-versed in this stuff, and certainly in the first-time instances. So I don't know if it'd take a motion, but I would like to reduce the fine to $1,000.
Okay, Galena West, Chief of Enforcement. In general, you would just reject the stipulation with direction with the 3 votes of the commission. In explanation of the fine, in this case, these charges could have been for each set. So the flyers, the door hangers, the mailers could have all been charged separately, which we consolidated into one. The other problem with this committee is that they were primarily formed in support, I think it was in support of Measure B or opposed to Measure B. Opposed to Measure B. And so with that not being in their name the entire time that they were in existence, it was misleading to the public that they were just R4 and not showing that they're actually opposed to the measure. So
Of course, the content said that they were opposed, right?
True, but when you don't know who sends the content, then you don't know how to evaluate it. So if you say you're a committee to support puppies and then you send out mailers about a measure, we don't really know who you are. And so the whole point of making sure that primarily formed committees have specific rules to identify their true interests is to help the voters to evaluate the information that they receive. So for this, we didn't charge them with not changing their committee name, which is generally a second count because we took into consideration that they're smaller and limited activity to one election. I would caution that when you're differentiating between newly formed committees and other committees, a lot of committees only form per election. So it's generally the same people that are active in their jurisdictions, but it's just a different election with a different committee name. And so you start fresh, so to speak. You might be the same person, but unless you've actually signed as the treasurer, which sometimes it's a professional treasurer, then we don't keep a record of you as a prior offender. So keeping that in mind, it's difficult sometimes to draw the distinction between newbies and people that
You
have been
mean if
in.
we find them before, that wouldn't come up?
Well, a lot of these committees, the only people that are liable under the act are the treasurers, an assistant treasurer if they sign that statement, or the principal officers of the committee. So you only have to identify one principal officer as the person making the decisions. So if you generally switch out people, then it's much harder in these elections to try to track how sophisticated a party is. So we don't put so much credence in that, but we do take it in consideration, like in here, by not changing the committee name and only charging 1 count instead of 4 counts. So we really did try to take in consideration. And as I've mentioned in passing to people, one of the things that enforcement is looking at for a future project is to expand the streamline programs to include a minor advertisement violation section, so that we can deal with when there's generally only one violation of the advertising sections, like they didn't get the font size exactly correct, and be able to add that to the streamline program. So that is something that we're looking at. In this case, they had 2 violations of I don't even know if they would qualify for this imaginary streamline program yet, but so that's why the fine is what it is, because there was a substantial amount of activity in a local election, and in local elections, as you know, it's this much activity really could make a difference.
So, because there was over 4,000 flyers, 2 sets of door hangers, and mass mailing all failed to comply.
Correct.
So, I mean, I think it's a pretty serious violation. I think there's a room full of people here who think failure to properly disclose who's behind an ad thinks it's a serious violation.
The irony has not escaped me, as everyone is, I can feel them staring at my bag.
And I would, you know,
If I'm supposed to be intimidated by that, I'm not.
it's not that you're
I have no
intimidated.
shame, and I
think-
just like to make sure that
I'm
people
actually
aren't
still talking.
unfairly dealt with, and the way I can explore
Correct.
that is to have this conversation.
Correct.
Sure, I'm
And
just
having-
actually speaking
excuse
to
me,
my
I
point.
was
Actually, I was when you interrupted, but thank you. So my point just being that I do think that advertisements in general are serious, and I wouldn't want us to set a policy where we start talking about lowering those fines. I do think it's a case by case, and I think this case was handled appropriately as Ms. West took into consideration those factors to lower what normally would be a higher fine for these types of violations.
Are you finished?
Commissioner Hatch.
Had you not interrupted me the first time, I would have told Galena that I was satisfied with her explanation. We had also talked about, and I know this is not exactly on point, but I would have had to pull a bunch of items off of the consent calendar to do so. But in general, I thought that the streamline program could use some fine tuning to provide a higher base fine for 24-hour violations, and actually to consider also increasing the 1% to a higher number, because it has almost no impact. If you have a large 24-hour contribution or expenditure that's not, not reported, the 1% really doesn't change it. So it sort of makes them all equal. A small, dollar violation would be virtually the same as a huge dollar violation, and I don't think that is really what we should be trying to do. That's all I have on that. Thank you.
I do have a question on that.
Commissioner Odero.
Thank you. So just kind of following up on what Commissioner Hatch said, and I understand that, maybe trying to figure out where the proper line is between a newbie and a not newbie is that's just a bit difficult. And I would not want to have that kind of a rule and then have you come and talk to us every time, and then we have a debate about whether the person is a newbie or is not a newbie. That said, I'm interested in whether these people actually were newbies. Mm-hmm. What do we know about these people, and what was taken into consideration about their level of expertise and how they responded, et cetera. But what do we know about these people? Because I really do think that even if we don't have a bright line, which I think would be difficult and I would never endorse, but we should take into consideration that along with all the other mitigating factors. So what do we know?
Certainly, and this was a group of citizens who was opposed to a large-scale development in their area. And although we didn't research each of the citizens, we took for granted that they were inexperienced, which is why we combined the counts and didn't charge the other count, because it is very, you can see by the way that we wrote it, it was like we tried to give the impression that we think that they got involved, they ended up raising more money than they expected, and then they started spending it, but they never asked for advice. They never reached out to anyone. So there's also things that you're like, well, we have so many resources available and reach out to these jurisdictions and say, you have an election coming up. We're offering classes in your area. I mean, our education division goes all over the state. And so while we take it in consideration, in this case, we definitely did, we also take in consideration, you have to make a little effort to follow the rules as well.
Right, no, and I totally agree with that. I have a personal friend of mine who went through this process and said it was just a nightmare, right? She was in a tiny little town. It was just this poor woman, I mean.
Please don't say that was one of my cases.
No, but if I were to run for office, and God forbid, but if I were to run for office, I would be very intimidated by this entire process if I didn't know anything about it. And I understand that there are resources, et cetera, but I think that we have to try to ensure that our fines aren't such that they chill the running for office. My friend will never run for office again, given her experience. And at the end of the day, I think that's a very sad shame because she's brilliant. She's very talented. She could contribute a lot to government. And so I think we have to try to find that line, right? I mean, these people are now going to have to fork up $3,000, whether it's a little or a lot or whatever it is. And, I want to make sure that they don't think, do I ever want to do this again? Do I ever want to get involved again?
And I hope that the experience for them, because they were dealing with our assistant chief and who would help educate them, help them understand the rules, help them find the ways to easily follow the rules next time. And that they learn from this and they say, well, actually this experience with enforcement wasn't that bad because we also learned all of this, so that if we ever want to oppose a development again, or if we ever want to oppose an ordinance my hope is that this actually comes out in a positive way, because we have a person assigned to us in the education division that we refer people to and say, ask your questions, she'll help you with your filing, she'll help you figure things out and learn from it. And I hope that maybe your friend ran a while ago.
I'll never call you.
because now we have the candidate toolkit on the website. We have other resources that the education has come up with to try to help people. So we never forget that one of the missions of the agency is education as well as enforcement.
Sure.
So we do try to take that in consideration.
Great, thank you.
A follow-up on that, if I could.
Commissioner Hatch?
Are the city clerks required to provide some minimal amount of information that would direct them to the FPPC and their oversight responsibilities?
They have filing officer duties that they have to comply with on what they provide. And then we work with the city clerks in order to identify ones that need more assistance. And we refer them to the education division. They reach out to them and say, here's some more you can do in this area. Here, we'll come and do a seminar. We'll assist you in any way we can.
So if I, filed for city council, let's say, at that point, the city clerk would give me some information that would sensitize me to the need.
Correct. Your city
would
council,
our-
your city clerk would be the one that assists you with.
And they would
your-
do that as a matter of course. Thank you.
Any further questions from the commissioners regarding this item?
I have 2 cents.
Okay.
Maybe 2.5 cents, which is, since it's not an agendaized item, talking about a streamline for ads is something that we should do at a later point. But, there's con law on this topic. The McIntyre case was all about, disclosures on, a flyer that Mrs. McIntyre had put together at I think it was a school board meeting or something, and the Ohio Election Commission going after her for not having the proper disclaimer, and the court saying, no, this is you do not get to fine this lady tons and tons of money for this act of speech. And it seems like a streamlined type setup would accommodate those constitutional concerns, which I know as an FPPC commissioner I'm not supposed to talk about, but I will anyway. Thank Thank you, Mr. Hildreth, wherever you are. But, we have to balance, a vivid constitutional concern with another important goal of ours, which is public information so that people can evaluate whether or not the message is something that they want to give credence to. At the local level, that can be really difficult. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but, local issues aren't well covered in the media. They tend to, make people's eyes glaze over unless they've really got skin in the game. And so that's my 2 cents. I hope a streamlined thing for ads can be something that we talk about in the future.
Okay, any public comment on item 7? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move approval.
Second?
Commissioner Darrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Hatch?
Yes.
Commissioner Hayward?
Yes.
Chair Rumkey?
Yes.
This motion passes.
Okay, the next item is item 40, which is a closed session item regarding pending litigation in the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association matter versus Brown. And I do understand that we have some members who would like to make a public comment before we go into closed session. So let's go ahead and have that before we go into closed session.
Thank you, Chair.
Is the mic on?
Thank you, Chair members.
Is that on? Is the light on?
Thank you, Chair members. Nicholas Hedrum with California Common Cause. Common Cause is the sponsor of SB 1107, which is the bill underlying the litigation Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association versus FPPC. Just wanted to show up to express our support for the FPPC appealing the decision, hopefully. We agree with the FPPC and the AG's underlying arguments in the lower court case. We think the decision was erroneous and is one that's ripe for appeal. Also just want to mention that 80% of Americans in a recent poll think that money has too much of an influence in our political campaigns. That's 80% of Republicans, Democrats, Independents. It's across the board. Further, 85% of Americans want to see fundamental change in our campaign finance system. We think that's what SB 1107 does, and we think that's why you saw a 2/3 bipartisan vote to get this bill passed. We also think that's why you saw over 40 organizations, a broad cross-section of California, including business and labor, including UFCW, Los Angeles Central Labor Council, environmental groups, civil rights groups, as well as local governments that currently are prevented from doing public financing, like Alameda County, Contra Costa County, come forward and support. So just in summary, we think this is a very important bill, and it's one that we urge and hope to support the FPPC in appealing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public, oh, you have a question for him?
Yes.
Excuse me.
Before you
Nicholas?
leave? Thank you.
Hi, Commissioner.
On the merits of your legislation, I personally was very supportive. I think it was a great idea. Troubled that, the Superior Court didn't do what I would consider to be the right thing. But I'm not a lawyer, so I can have those fantasies or errors of understanding. I'm concerned that while this decision is important, it's not one that directly attacks a local ordinance that would implement this, which is probably where the rubber really meets the road. And I would ask you, do you think that you're better off or worse off to reach that point if we go ahead and appeal this and lose?
So if we don't appeal the decision and let it stand, that would mean the local governments, except for charter cities, would not be able to do campaign public financing. If we appeal the decision and lose, it's essentially the same outcome. Charter cities would still maintain their exemption, but their local governments wouldn't. So from that perspective, we feel strongly the decision should be appealed to give counties like Contra Costa, Alameda, with special districts and cities supporting bills that want to be able to be responsive to their constituents, be able to do this.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't a Superior Court decision can be ignored if it's not, they're not direct parties? So like the city of, say, Santa Ana could adopt a local ordinance if we stop this process right now, and they would be able to do that, and of course they would be challenged in a separate litigation. Am I not right?
It's potentially true. I don't know exactly how it would work in terms of the court having voided it, so I'm not sure what the statute would read like based on that. But given that If this case were to stand, we think most local governments would be chilled from even attempting it. So for that reason, in addition, we'd want to see the decision appealed.
Thank you.
Additional public comment on item 40?
Emily Rush, Executive Director of the California Public Interest Research Group, or CalPIRG, and we support SB 1107, and I associate my comments with Nicholas's before.
Thank you.
And I'm Helen Hutchison, the president of the League of Women Voters of California, and we also strongly support SB 1107 and would like to see the lawsuit go forward.
Thank you. Any additional public comment before we go into closed session? Seeing or hearing none, we will go off the record. Oh, what's?
Good morning. I'm Colleen Beamish, Chief of Staff to Senator Ben Allen. He was not able to attend the hearing today, although I know he would have liked to be here. He asked me to convey that he would urge the commission to file an appeal on the recent court decision involving his legislation, Senate Bill 1107. He feels that it's vitally necessary to move that appeal forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, final call. Okay, seeing or hearing none, we're going to go off the record and go into closed session. Back to that.
Do we need to do that? Do we leave it?
Hey, Emma. No, we're.
Thank you all for your patience. Where'd they go? Did you guys hijack the rest of the, oh, here they come. Long way.
Okay, just as to item 40, I will report out of closed session that the commission has voted to appeal the Superior Court's decision. So we have one more item, and then we'll try to move quickly for all you patient people. Item 41 is the adoption of Amendment to Regulation 18351 regarding the agency's code. So, Brian?
Hello, Commissioners. Brian Lau, Commission Counsel with the Legal Division, and I'm here to introduce proposed amendments to Regulation 18351, which is the agency's Conflict of Interest Code. The Political Reform Act requires every agency to adopt a Conflict of Interest Code that designates each position with the agency in a decision-making capacity that may foreseeably affect a financial interest, and identify the types of interest that each designated position are required to report. The act requires the FPPC to review its code every 2 years, and the code must be amended whenever new positions are added or the duties of an existing positions are changed. The FPPC's Conflict of Interest Code was last amended in 2016. Each of the amendments to the code have been described in the statement of reasons attached to the memorandum to the commission. The most significant of these amendments stem from the reorganization of the Technical Assistance Division into the External Affairs and Education Division. Under this reorganization, the Information Officer and Legislative Coordinator have been moved into the External Affairs and Education Division, along with the Technical Assistance Chief Physician and staff specializing in phone assistant and public outreach. Statements of economic interest review have been moved into the Administrative and Technical Division to better coordinate with the implementation of electronic filing. And third, Technical Assistant Chief and staff specializing in email assistance and conflict of interest code review have been moved into the Legal Division, as these duties are coordinated with legal attorneys and often reviewed by legal attorneys. I should note that there was a typo on page 2 of the code. There's a number 3 for the position of External Affairs. That was a deleted position, so the 3 should be shown and striked out as well.
Slow down on that part.
No
Which
problem.
page of,
would
which
be-
page of the proposed code are you looking at?
Page 2 of the code,
Under which division?
about 4 lines down.
Oh, you just say because that position actually was crossed out. It's
Right.
it's the 4th listed position. Oh, I think you're looking at something else. No, Maria, I think you're looking at. So we've deleted the External Affairs position. And so
So
we should
the-
have just crossed out 3.
So the 3 should have been
Yeah.
crossed out as well, so it's just a minor typo that
Okay.
will be fixed before it goes over for publication
Yeah.
and approval. With this, I propose the adoption of 18351, and I can answer any questions we have, if any commissioners have regarding any of the specific changes.
Okay,
or
any
amendments.
questions from the commissioners? Any public, oh, sorry.
Didn't we get a communication on this? Somebody?
Yeah, public comment, we do have a public comment letter that's been submitted, and then if you don't have it, I will ask if there's any public comment. Any public comment?
My name is Cynthia Jones. I'm a political reform consultant for the FPPC.
Is the mic on?
Thank you. My name is Cynthia Jones. I'm a political reform consultant for the FPPC for the last 18 years. I appreciate your willingness to hear me, and more importantly, I want to thank you for your interest in the fairness of the FPPC and its regulated community and staff. The proposed code and reorg limits, segregates, and classify employees in ways which tends to deprive employment opportunities and other adversely affects. Failure to open and recruit vacancies, hires not selected on merits but by patronage, Equal Pay Act violations, favoritism, workforce equality, preferential treatment and work assignments, and abuse of authorities are common concerns and common practices made possible by the lack of accountability and transparency in the overall administration of HR services. Human resource are the people who work exists to serve the needs of the people. It is the first line of defense when faced with employment discrimination, workplace bullying and harassment, and a slew of other work-related issues. HR is out of compliance with past practices and other fair treatment of personnel rules and the master agreement.
I hope your job won't be in jeopardy over that.
Well, of course it wouldn't be, but
Madam Chair?
questions, any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do you have a question, Commissioner Hatch?
Yeah, procedurally,
Okay.
would it not, there's obviously some open issues that could be resolved with a little bit of time. Maybe we should just put this over.
Ms. Peth, you want to respond to that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Excuse me. So, to your point, Commissioner Hatch, we're aware of the concerns that Ms. Jones has raised, and obviously there are confidential personnel issues that are at issue here. But our position is that those concerns are being addressed under the appropriate methodology in which we do so, and that they are not really relevant to the adoption of the Conflict of Interest Code, which Mr. Lau obviously presented in terms of the Conflict of Interest Code represents the, is a document based on the existing organizational structure that we have put in place and outlines the disclosure categories. So that is what it is, and I think that that can be adopted, and while we continue to work through the issues that Ms. Jones has raised.
Isn't it possible some of these things that she's raised here today might end up before the commission itself, if they can't be resolved otherwise?
I mean, there's a lot of elements to what's been discussed. It may be possible, but I think some of those are going to be resolved potentially through other avenues, so.
Some.
Right, but even if something needs to come back before the commission, it's not relevant to the adoption of the Conflict of Interest Code.
Well, as a longtime representative of working people, I do appreciate leverage. And working people often don't have much leverage. And so when it's appropriate, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Well, let's have other comments or questions before a motion. Go ahead, Commissioner O'Darrell.
Thank you. So being a practitioner of employment law, I hear many things in this, and I actually wasn't able to write down all of the concerns that you have, but I'm trying to, so clearly there are some concerns about discrimination, harassment, bullying of you as an employee here. Is that correct? I mean, you stopped nodding your head, so I'm not sure if I misstated that.
The statements that are made not just affect me. It's not a personal issue. I represent the staff.
Okay, so assuming that you represent the staff, and I don't want to get into that right now, but that it seems like there's two things happening here. There are some concerns about discrimination, harassment, bullying, workplace concerns, wage and hour issues, pay equity. I tried to remember everything you said. I'm sorry I didn't write everything down. Which is one set of issues, which is not an appropriate set of issues for us to deal with unless somehow those issues are related to the Conflict of Interest Code that is before us for a vote right now. And I don't understand the connection that you're making.
It is the reorganization of that code that I'm tying this to, because that is the...
How? I mean, what are you saying exactly that it shouldn't have been reorganized? Why?
It's reorganized to limit, to classify and segregate employees in ways that deprives employment opportunities.
But what does that have to do with whether a particular position is required to adhere to the conflict of interest rules?
Well, basically, the reorganization doesn't go into the details of those positions that duties have been changed. They don't really specify the disproportionate duties of the employees, but.
So are you finished? I don't want to
Yes.
interrupt you. Okay, so explain to me, so what we're doing here is we are adopting a regulation that categorizes positions into an assigned disclosure category, right?
Correct.
And so basically, as I'm reading this, it says the executive director is in assigned disclosure category 1. And then it goes on, right? And the executive fellow is in assigned disclosure category 3. How is their disclosure category and the various disclosure categories here, what does that have to do with your discrimination and harassment and retaliation concerns?
Because basically it is the technical assistant division that's been divided into what they're called as reorganization. And it basically separates classifications and leaves the bulk of the work with a very few and relieves others of the full tasks of the job. So
But what does that have to do with the disclosure category of each position?
the disclosure category remains unchanged, although the duties have been changed.
But what does that have to do with whether which the only thing that's before us now, which is whether we approve this restructuring so that, and the disclosure categories that follow?
Well, basically, the code itself, has the language in it, and like I said, it doesn't matter if you approve it or not, but I did want to bring to your attention that what it really does.
Okay, Commissioner Hatch?
Buried in this document that we're looking to approve or not, it shifts individuals from one department or segment of the organization, and with that may change their, individuals might be treated differently in terms of what level of disclosure that they would be required to do.
That would be the case, yes.
So it's not just simply it's not, it does affect individual people in different.
Let me just clarify. Brian, did we change any categories of people as a result of the?
We ultimately only have 5 categories, and there's the highest level categories for all division chiefs have full disclosure, all the lawyers and attorneys have full disclosure, and then there's a disclosure category for enforcement, and then the remainder of the decision-making employees fall into category, I believe it's category 2 or 3. It's category 3, which is essentially the same, and that's a uniform category that's been in existence and is going to stay in existence. So no one's been moved from that category. It's the existing category that all non-enforcement staff fall into when they fall into a non-enforcement position or a non-procurement position. So
I just want to clarify, so as a result of the reorganization.
the duties have been compared and they fall back.
But again, to Commissioner Odero's point, the purpose of approving this for the disclosure category, those have not changed.
Right.
I think a simpler way to say is, excuse me, the position at issue is the political reform consultant position. And although they now are in actually 3 of our divisions, they all share the same disclosure category, which is category 3, which was what they had previous even to this adoption.
Okay, so to follow up on my question, I noticed that you divide groups and take part of a group and put it in this other division and in more than one place, and then some people are into a newly created one and others are just, you're saying that none of them will have a change in their category of disclosure?
Correct. The political reform consultants report in disclosure category 3, and they did previously to this.
Nobody's going from 4 to 3 or vice versa?
Not for the positions that we're discussing.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Odero?
Thank you. I don't think that, with all due respect, Commissioner Hatch, I don't think that question matters here. I think what we have is we have a restructuring that took place. You may have issues with the restructuring. I hear you. But we have a restructuring that took place, and we're not here to discuss the restructuring. We are here to discuss that what happened to the disclosure categories as a result of the disclosure, of the restructure, which has nothing to do with the restructure. So I don't understand why we're having this discussion, I guess. I guess we needed to get to this point. We needed to hear what you had to say and kind of talk it through. But if your concern is with the restructure, this is not the right place or time for a discussion about that. What we are voting on is a restructure has happened. Whether we agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. And as a result of that, we have to now fix the conflict of interest code. That's it, right? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any additional public comment? Okay, is there a motion?
Yes. I have a motion to table. It's not debatable. Up or down?
Is there a second on
I
that?
have a question about it because I don't understand the motion. We're going to table it to when?
I'm open on that. I would suggest to the following meeting, what this is, be the October meeting.
Is there a second on the motion? Okay, no second. Is there any, that fails? Is there any additional motion?
I move approval.
I second.
Commissioner Adaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Hatch,
No.
Commissioner Hayward,
Yes.
Chair Remke.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so we're going to move to executive staff reports, and we're just going to jump right into legislation because people have been patiently waiting, so let's get to that.
Good morning, Commissioners. Philip Ong, Legislative Director. At the table with me is Suki Brar, Senior Counsel for the Legal Division, and Trish Mayer, Assistant Chief of the Legal Division. Before we get started, for the big ticket item, for which I sold tickets. No, I'm just kidding. I wanted to update you on the status of the bills in the legislative report, starting on page 14 of the executive report. As you know, the legislature has ended their first year session, and so many of these bills are not in the place that were previously stated. And so for bill numbered 1, which is AB 249, it's now on the governor's desk. It's I think it said that it was on the Senate floor. Skipping over to Bill 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10, and 11, they're all on the governor's desk. So essentially, all of the bills 5 through 11 minus 7 are all on the governor's desk. Number 7 is not on the governor's desk.
Okay, so with that, I will start asking if the commissioners want to ask question of Mr. Ong, or would you prefer to go ahead and hear public comment first? Any questions before we begin public comment? Let me just say it that way.
Let's go with public comment.
Any questions?
Yeah, I can wait.
Okay, then let's start with public comment. I believe a lot of you are here from the Clean Money Act, is that correct? And I know that you have a spokesperson. And I also will note for the record that we received over 5,000 emails, which have been stated for the record. And those have also, the identical one has been shared with the commissioners and has been posted. So I just want to acknowledge we all have that. And not to cut anyone off, but I would have, when it's his turn, Mr. Lang start, and then anyone else who feels from the Clean Money they would like to come up and state their name and from where they're from for the record, we'll do it that way, okay? All right.
Well, hold on, not okay. So I don't think it's appropriate to limit, all these people have come here to speak with us, and I don't think it's appropriate to limit them to their name and whatever else you said. What did you say?
where they're from, and because,
where
again,
they're
I'm just trying to avoid them having to say the same thing over and over, and I know that Mr. Lang is their spokesperson and quite a sufficient leader, but we will open it up, and everyone will be limited to 2 minutes. Okay.
No, hold on. This is not, it is not appropriate to limit the speech of all the people who have come here without having done so through the way that we are allowed to do it. So we can't limit speech because we just don't feel like hearing it. We don't get to limit speech because it's duplicative. That's not how the law works. That's unconstitutional. We can have appropriate time, place, manner restrictions if we follow the right procedures to get there. So before we go there, I would like to know what regulation we have passed that allows us to do that. Because that's where the game starts. We have to pass a regulation through the Administrative Procedures Act to limit time, place, through time, place, manner, and we have to give people an opportunity, and they have to know through our notice that our agenda, that we are going to limit speech to time, place, manner, and in this case, name and where they're from, or 2 minutes, or 3 minutes, or 5 minutes, or whatever it is that we're going to do. So unless we have the regulation that allows us to do this, I don't think we can. So I would suggest that instead we appeal to the great people of California who have traveled all this way to say what they feel that they need to say, and we're here to listen. And, you know, I can change my flight. I don't know that you folks want to be here all day, but I certainly don't want to be part of a commission that silences all these people who have taken the time to travel to come talk to us.
Okay, so, yeah, that's fine. Just to clarify, I'm not trying to silence, I'm trying to follow the normal practice which we have, which has been challenged, and that is fine. That is fine. I do not intend to silence anyone, and I guess we'll just see how this proceeds. Go, please, sir.
Sit back, everyone.
I'll try to be brief. I will be brief. My name is Hugh Bauer. I'm Chief of Staff to Assembly Speaker Pro Tempore Kevin Mullen, the author of AB 249, the Disclose Act. I'm sure you're all aware, in recent years, California has seen campaign spending on ballot measures reach unprecedented levels. In fact, over $1 billion was spent on ballot measures between 2012 and 2016. AB 249 will fundamentally change how campaign financing is disclosed in the state of California. We feel it's long overdue. The status quo allows donors to hide behind layers of misleading organization names, enabling campaigns to conceal their top funders. Additionally, campaigns can bury donor information in fine print that's flashed on TV ads, making it nearly impossible for voters to identify the true funders of campaign advertisements. Assemblymember Mullen, working with the Clean Money Campaign in 2017, introduced AB 249 as a nonpartisan effort to provide more information to voters on both sides, all sides of the aisle. AB 249 will bring greater transparency to California, allowing voters the opportunity to make better informed decisions based upon honest information. If enacted, AB 249 will be the strongest law in the country relating to campaign finance. If AB 249 should fail, the status quo will continue, which to our mind is unacceptable. AB 249 is supported by the Clean Money Campaign, the League of Women Voters, Common Cause, and literally thousands of private individuals, Californians that feel passionate about this issue. Last Friday, with strong bipartisan support, both houses of the legislature sent AB 249 to the governor and now awaits the signature. On behalf of Assembly Speaker Pro Tem Kevin Mullen, I respectfully request the commission to vote to support AB 249. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Bob Stern. I was your first general counsel from 1975 to 1983. I also was one of the principal co-authors of the Political Reform Act. And for 28 years, I was president of the Center for Governmental Studies based in Los Angeles, where I'm based. A philosopher once said, "The perfect is the enemy of the good." What you have with AB 249 is not only good, but an excellent bill, but not a perfect bill. But I learned a long time ago that perfection is usually not possible, especially when it comes to legislation that has to be approved by 2/3 of the legislature. Even the Political Reform Act was not perfect, although I helped write it. And even though it was an initiative, that only had to be approved by a handful of people during its drafts. That's why the Political Reform Act was one of the first initiatives to allow legislative amendments. And that's why there's an FPPC, to write regulations, opinions, advice letters to help interpret and make better legislation that's passed. I have to say, during our first few months in 1975, we had meetings twice a week to deal with regulations. You won't have to have meetings twice a week to deal with this legislation. I don't think you'll have to have that many meetings, but we did because we were getting started. The FPPC is usually in the forefront of presenting and supporting legislation that improves campaign disclosure, and this bill does that. It makes it far easier for the public to see who is backing ballot measures and candidates. Disclosure on ads is the best form of disclosure. It is what more of the public will use, as opposed to having to go to a website to look up contributions. I understand change is always difficult, but California now leads the nation in disclosure, but it can always do better, and this bill is better than what we have right now. So I urge you to support the bill, at least remain neutral, and then to work with the public, the regulated community, and other groups to make sure this bill accomplishes its goals for next year's election. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Stern.
Hello, Commissioners. Trent Lang, President of the California Clean Money Campaign, the sponsor of the bill. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the Commission for its very strong and powerful and nation-leading work in terms of addressing the problems of dark money in politics when it comes to disclosures. I think that has been an inspiration for everybody, and we really appreciate that. But we firmly believe, and as you can see, lots of people and groups firmly believe that online disclosure is not enough. We absolutely have to have disclosure where people see it. The vast majority of people don't go to the Secretary of State website. The vast majority of people who go to the Secretary of State website can't really find what they want to see. Even when they do go, people need to see it on political ads, and that's what this bill has been about. You saw our letter of critique of the staff's position. I'm not going to go all the way into most of the details of that, but I would like to also thank the staff for working with us over the years on this issue, and I hope that I know that you will recognize that over last year's bill, we actually did take a number of amendments suggested by staff to improve the bill and address some of the concerns of it, though we were not able to accept all of them due to the legislative process. What is, I think, important, first of all, there are multiple issues that we have to address to get at the heart of true funders of campaigns. That's what people want to see. That's what the voters want to see. That's what polls want to see. And that's what the overwhelming, extraordinary response, I think, to this bill wants to see. There are a couple of aspects of the staff analysis that I just want to point out that we believe that it missed. For instance, there is a part of the staff analysis where it is concerned about a language in the language that says that earmarking must have express consent. And it is true that one of the paragraphs, 85704B1, does address the cases of where a contributor requests, where a committee explicitly requested the contributor to expressly consent to such use. And if that were the only provision of the earmarking, new earmarking in the language, then we too would be concerned. But it is not the only provision of earmarking in the language. B2 explicitly says the contribution was made subject to a condition or agreement with the contributor that all or portion would be used to make a contribution to another specifically identified committee, ballot measure, or candidate. That does not mention express consent. That means that you will be able to use that paragraph to go after the exact same sorts of cases that you're able to now But crucially, and this is a really important thing, currently, Section 85704 only deals with contribution earmarking for particular candidates. That's not enough. People care about ballot measures. People care about independent expenditures. People care about earmarking to specific committees. That's what this is about. And then the big ticket thing that I know that people have raised lots of questions, and that is the new provision in 85704 that says that dues, fees, assessments, and other payments made to a membership organization in an amount less than $500 per calendar year from a single source for the purpose of making contributions or expenditures shall not be considered earmarked. Staff has raised concerns about that. Some stakeholders and legislators raised concerns about that particular issue as providing some sort of loophole or exclusion for membership organizations. We believe just the opposite about that fact. Because what we want to get at, what we think the public wants to get at when it comes to earmarking is who the true funders are. When money is traced along, that's the whole goal, is earmarking things so that if money is filtered through multiple layers of committees in an attempt to hide, in many cases, that the public gets the information at the end of the day in the final committee, especially on the ads, who the true funder is. And under current law, without having this exclusion, which says shall not be considered earmarked, there is actually a risk in current code that a membership organization could put an assessment onto all of their members, is essentially a mandatory thing that they're allowed to opt out, but most don't, and then pass that large sum of money along and claim that that money was earmarked not from them, the membership organization, but from the individual members, Mary and Joe and Bill and Bob, thousands upon thousands of them who each were earmarked $117, $221, or whatever. That information is, in our view, and that's what would show up on the final committee if this exclusion was not in here. That's the only difference between having this exclusion and not having this exclusion. We don't think it serves the public. We don't think it serves true disclosures to have those final committees show the names of all those individual thousands and thousands of members, be they union members or other membership organization members, instead of what people really care about, and that is the name of the membership organization. That's the one that should be earmarked and shown on those ads. People, if they're interested in seeing the original members, they can go back to the original membership organization's reports and see that information. So that's why I'll be happy to take any questions about that particular part, but I think that is actually a very important part of the bill. It was amended from previous versions that had a much higher threshold of $7,300. That was not understandable, but we think this is actually a benefit both to membership organizations and to the public for showing true funders.
Thank you for that explanation. I was quite frankly concerned about various versions that didn't address that issue. And this, as you pointed out earlier, this expands the kinds of things that would be subject now to this, whereas before it was just a narrow area. And organizations give, small amounts of money, assess other members, with their consent, is the counterbalance to the big dark money folks. And if we were to hobble them in such a manner to force them to, and everything they do, provide lists of thousands of people and, that little amount of money, it would take away the focus from the actual important thing is what is the collective money being done with it? And what is that unifying organization, whether it be SEIU or firefighters or whatever. Right. That's something the public can deal with.
Yes.
And process, whether that's good or bad. And I commend you for doing that.
Yes, absolutely. That is the purpose of it. People will still be able to see those individual members if they're interested by going to the membership organization's own reports. But what we believe is important, we don't want to provide undue burdens to passing along thousands and thousands of things through layers of committees. But most importantly, it should be the membership organization that is earmarked and shown up in the final committees, be traced along and shown up on ads if there are ads that they're a top 3 funder for.
One question. In your view, as structured, if the membership organization sent money, say, to the party to be earmarked for a particular candidate or cause, they're still subject to the same requirements that it be double disclosed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, that's part of the point of that provision is to make sure that is the membership organization itself as an entity that is the one that is considered earmarked and therefore subject to any contribution limits, any reporting requirements, et cetera. That is the purpose of it, and that's what all the experts that we have had look at the bill agree with. And that's why you have the support of the good government community behind this measure, as I think you'll see. So if there are no more questions on that particular provision, I'll just close, basically. In short, this is California does have some of the best online disclosure laws in the country regarding dark money, but as you will receive testimony from many, many people and already have, that's not enough. The Disclose Act will help California lead the nation in terms of online disclosure. As Bob Stern said, it is not perfect. We will certainly acknowledge that, but we believe it's a dramatic improvement. We've taken many efforts to balance it. And I think that's part of the reason why, when you look at your public comments, first of all, this bill passed the legislature with overwhelming bipartisan support in both houses. Over 350 organizations endorsed it. Over 100,000 people signed petitions for this bill this year. And then on your own comments, you'll have, I know that you have 11 letters representing 21 organizations, and then, of course, those 5,300 individual Californians. So I think you'll see this as extraordinary support for an extraordinarily important bill. We respectfully request that you not vote to oppose unless amended, and that you, in fact, lead by actually supporting the bill, but at the very worst, going neutral. Thank you.
Emily Rash, Executive Director with CalPERG again, and I'm also here today to ask you to take a support position for AB 249. This bill has been 7 years in the making. We support the latest version of it, and we think it is a marked step forward for campaign disclosure, both in the way that the ads are, or the way the disclosure is on the ads, as well as the earmarking provisions. Thank you so much.
Nicholas Heidorn with California Common Cause. We're also urging a support position on this bill. The field poll, which unfortunately is no more, but a number of years ago did a poll asking voters how they felt about ballot measure disclosure, and it was 85% felt there needed to be additional disclosure on ballot measures. We think it's important that people, when they receive the ads, have an understanding of who's behind it, because understanding the messenger can help you understand the message. As Trent explained, there's strong bipartisan support for this measure. We endorse it, and we hope you guys do as well. Thank you.
Hi, Robert Longer with the Communications Workers of America, CWA, District 9, California. On behalf of our 50,000 members in California, we urge you to support AB 249. This strong level of bipartisan support is shared by the labor community, certainly shared by our organization, but other colleagues within the California Labor Federation. They have agreed to work, and were able to amend legislation that's amenable to labor, that also puts us on par with the rest of the community that are funding these ads, notably the Chamber of Commerce and other business organizations. What we need here, and what AB 249 will do, is to provide for a level playing field for disclosure purposes. Quite simply, who's paying for these ads, and that it's clear and it's concise, and that people can understand in a quick time frame and easily digest that who is providing for the funding for these ads. It's pretty simple, actually. We don't need Citizens for a Greater California. We need to know who's paid for by CWA or paid for by the Chamber of Commerce. And so I would urge you to reject your staff's recommendation to support this. But as Trent said, if you cannot do that, then to remain neutral. The citizens of California deserve better, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Helen Hutchison, the president of the League of Women Voters of California, and we support AB 249 and urge that you also support it. We believe it would be a significant step forward in disclosure, an important disclosure for the California public. Thanks.
Alex Saslow with MapLight, a nonprofit that tracks money in politics. Current state laws are frankly insufficient to provide California voters with vital information about just who is behind ads, and innocuous sounding names that obscure the funders' true identities leaves voters well short of the information they need to clearly assess an ad that informs their decision. Our research indicates that indeed on-ad disclosure of the true source of funders of an ad provides voters with valuable information that helps them evaluate those political messages. We urge you to please support this important legislation that will strengthen democracy in California. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for your excellent work over the years. My name is Kristen Shannon. I'm a native Californian and a registered California voter. Today, however, I'm here to bring a message from Ohio, where we have launched a ballot initiative based on the last decade of work here that's resulted in 249 SB. We've launched an OpenOhio.Solutions organization to accomplish the same goals as the California Disclose Act. People outside this room are watching. California is a vital model for other states, and Ohio is the next state to take up the challenge to enact rules to reduce the impact of dark money in politics. While we cannot quickly reverse Citizens United nor instantly end gerrymandering, we can act state by state to open up truth in political advertising. The science of manipulation in political advertising is far too precise. Voters need to know who's writing the checks. It's time to reduce the impact of dark money in politics. And that's why there's national attention on what's happening in this room today. I'd like to thank everyone in the room for all the work that they've done to open up truth in advertising. The rest of the nation is waiting to see what happens here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Chairperson Renke. My name is Shane McLeod. I'm a former public school teacher in Central Los Angeles with over 10 years of full-time classroom experience, a former school board member of Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District, and most recently I served as the campaign manager to Voters' Right to Know. I'm here representing Money Out, Voters In. MOVI is an organization of democracy advocates dedicated to ending corporate rule and promoting civic engagement. Before us today is an opportunity to create the best disclosure law in the country. As you know, this effort has been spearheaded by the California Clean Money Campaign and has been supported by many organizations dedicated to improving our democracy, including MOVI, and is strongly supported by hundreds of thousands of Californians who want to end dark money and elevate public awareness in political spending. This has been a 7-year struggle. Today, you have the opportunity to support this struggle by supporting AB 249 and encouraging the governor to sign it into law. This is a grassroots movement. The years-long campaign for the California Disclose Act has been powered by the people of California, who have refused to take no for an answer and who have continued to show up at the Capitol, make phone calls, send emails, come to committee meetings like this, and sign petitions. Over 100,000 Californians signed the current petition in support of AB 249. While Californians have different ideas about whose money is tilting the scales in our elections, we broadly agree that special interests are the major players who are both shielded and masked, who unfairly operate under the cover of anonymity, and who are the politically powerful organizations who determine outcomes in our elections and in our policies. We reject the Commissioner's assertion that the California Disclose Act adds complexity without commensurate benefit to our elections. This is not complex. The political influencers will adjust to the reporting regulations. The benefits are huge. One being a more informed electorate. The other benefit is sunlight on political spending. And as we know, sunlight is the best disinfectant. The California Disclose Act will be the clearest and most unambiguous tool available to the voters of California to determine whose interests will be served by a yes or no vote on ballot measures. We would urge you not to overlook this particular moment as you make recommendations to the governor. Please do not let the great and possibly unattainable be the enemy of good reform. This is good reform. Unregulated dark money is what got us here. We ask you to support this measure, or at the very least stay neutral, and allow California to improve our transparency and disclosure laws. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gordon Miller. I'm from Walnut Creek. I'm with the California Alliance for Retired Americans. We are California's largest grassroots we're the California's largest grassroots senior advocacy organization, where we have approximately 1 million people in our affiliate organizations. We proudly endorse AB 249. It will be good to see California take the lead in knowing who is really behind Californians for Truth, Justice, the American Way, and lower taxes. Thank you.
My name is Michael Karsh. I'm from Martinez. I'm with Move to Amend, and I urge you to support AB 249 so that it can be clear to voters who's funding who are the top 3 funders of political ads, so that they can decide whether or not they want to believe them. So please strongly support AB 249.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Lino. I'm from Oakhurst, California, down where the wildfires are finally settling down a bit. And I'm here as a past candidate for public office on both local and federal level to appreciate your comments earlier today about trying to keep that threshold of complexity low so that people are encouraged to come up from the grassroots and run for office. I hope to be back and successful in the future. But I want to ask you to support AB 249. It really is key legislation. I got and read my fat little booklet from my county clerk when I ran for office and filed, and I would love to have a few additional pages that assured me that if there were ads being run in the campaigns that I was active in, that people would know who was paying for those ads. I would welcome that complexity. Thank you very much.
I'm Pam Marabella. I live in El Cerrito, California. I am a former Contra Costa County Board of Education trustee for the past 28 years. I just lost my election last election. First of all, you know, democracy equals transparency. I have worked on legislation for so many years with California School Boards Association, our own association for the county boards, and I have watched the process. And I have watched 17 ballots last year. And I want the public to know who's funding them, the pros and cons. This is a bipartisan. My position was nonpartisan. But what I want to tell you, even in West Contra Costa County that I represented, and that includes Richmond and San Pablo and all those good cities, we need transparency even on local school board races. I want you to know last time, $681,000 was spent on 2 candidates to get a 3rd person on the board from the charters. I want you to know that there's not even transparency when I filed my 460 from the person who ran against me. There's something wrong with the system. Yeah, I can file a complaint, but I want people, when they see the flyer, Education Matters, to know who's funding that. And then they have another flyer for PTA, which is Teachers Parents Alliance. Who are they? I want the public to know who they are. So please send the message to Governor Brown very clearly that we need to pass AB 249. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rita Xavier from San Pablo, Contra Costa County. I'm an Assembly District 15 delegate to the California Democratic Party, And as you probably know, the Democratic Party endorsed this AB 249. Also, I'm an alternate for my senator in the county Democratic Party, and she endorsed AB 249 and voted for it. So I urge you to support this measure. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is C.T. Weber. I'm the Legislative Committee Chair for the Peace and Freedom Party of California. For full disclosure, I should mention that Peace and Freedom Party opposed the creation of the Political Reform Act back in 1974. And the reason that we were opposed to it is because of the what we felt was bureaucracy interfering with small candidates who did not have the money to comply with all the bureaucratic procedures that were put forward. We're not talking about that now. We're talking about people with big money that can afford to handle these things, which is a different category. And we fully support and have supported for years the Political Reform Act of, we are now supporting AB 249. We hope you will vote for it. Thank you very much.
Lawrence Abbott, San Leandro. I'm with Indivisible East Bay, Indivisible Berkeley, Indivisible San Francisco, Our Revolution, and Move to Amend East Bay Affiliate Group. And I'm a Teamster delegate to the Alameda Labor Council. Everybody I know, everybody I work with wants this as a step in the right direction. Please support it.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for your attention. My name is Mary Linton. I'm from San Ramon, California, and I strongly support your taking a position of strong support for this bill. I want to say one or two things. I think people need clear disclosure. And when we talk about the complexity in this bill, the complexity is not caused by the citizen opening their mailbox. It's caused by whoever it is that wants to hide their identity when they're paying for these ads. So bear that in mind when we think about complexity. I held a CPA license my entire career, worked in big business, small business, and government sector. So I understand complexity and bureaucracy. I'm very sympathetic, but democracy is worth it. Please support the bill. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Brad Tuvey, and over the years, I'm from San Ramon, California, and over the years, I've come to the conclusion, that big money, dark money, secret money has been diluting our democracy. My neighbors and friends, when they see political ads, they don't know what to believe anymore, and too many people are no longer voting because they believe that it doesn't matter, because they believe that candidates or these flyers are misrepresenting statements of fact. And so my opinion is that the top funders, if they're, when their top funders' money is disclosed in political ads, it will help strengthen our democracy. People will be able to see where that money is coming from, to know if it's from Chevron, a billionaire, a union, it doesn't matter. So information is critical, and having that on the ads is what the people are asking for. So I'm hoping that, I'm asking everybody to do the right thing and support this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Pendleton, a registered voter from Davis, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I urge your support of this bill.
Hello, my name is Barbara Anders, and I'm a retired teacher from Watsonville, California. And I have the 2-minute version, and I have the 15-second version, so I go with the 15-second version. You all look like normal folks. I feel your stress, actually, and I applaud your work. You do very, very good work. But you have an extraordinary challenge and responsibility to re-engage the entire country, really, politically, because as California goes, so goes the nation. Ohio will be the next. The citizens of California and the country are clamoring for transparency, and AB 249 offers it. And it has unprecedented bilateral support, so that should be easy for you, an easy excuse to go ahead and recommend it to the governor. The complexities that the commission's analysis has alluded to, there's been some talk about complexities. We live in a complex time right now. This was not a hastily written, impulsively written act. It's been long in the coming, and given the sway that this commission has with the governor, I urge each one of you to find the integrity and the strength of character to recommend it to him in its entirety without amendment. Thank you very much.
My name is Carla Kincaid Yoshikawa from San Francisco. I've been working on this for going on 6 years, and there are people in this room who were here when I started. So we've dedicated our time to doing this because deceptive ads plus hidden funders does not equal fair political practices. And that equation is corroding our politics and our faith in our government. We have to know who's behind those ads, who is going to put down hard money to convince us to vote a certain way in order to assess what does that really mean? What is it really about? So please support this.
Hi, I'm Judy Steele from Clovis, California, and I'm here representing the Fresno County committee members, other members who couldn't make it today who work on the California Disclose Act. And I'm just going to say ditto, 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 ditto. I mean, they all took away what I wanted to say, and I've been coming up for 6 to 7 years. I'm tired, but I'll keep coming if you, well, I really want you to approve this bill. Oh, please, save us.
Chris Hamilton from Berkeley. I'm tired of looking at the TV ads with opaque, somewhat appealing names. You don't really know who's behind them. This bill will cure that. Please support the disclosures so the top 3 funders that are really behind the proposal being advertised will be known. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Pat Sachs, retired social worker from Oakland. I came to 249 when I learned that between $9 and $11 billion a year does not go to California because of corporations that are under Prop 13. And I know there will be a proposition on the ballot in 18 to exclude corporations from Prop 13, but it will be slaughtered if corporations can hide behind what they can hide behind now. So please, for the sake of education and healthcare and all that money will go to if California has it finally. Thank you.
Geraldine Stapleton. I'm president of the California National Organization for Women, which is the largest women's organization. We are in very strong support of AB 249. Somebody else pointed out in terms of the dark money that are in the legislative elections and also the school board elections in Los Angeles, California. It was the largest amount of millions of dollars that were spent just to get one seat on the LAUSD. The general public is, if you're not working within the process, either with legislation or campaigns, you're not really very aware. And when pieces of go out, to the voters, they have absolutely no idea of who's paying or the TV ads that they depend upon to get their information. They really don't know any better, and they really have a right to know actually who is funding those. So we really, really would appreciate an aye vote from you and your support. Thank you very much.
My name is Marianne Kirsch, and I'm from Davis, and I want to say that as an average person representing my nonprofit, I had reason to get on the website for the Secretary of State and for the Equalization Board, and I did find it difficult even when I had people working with me. So I want to say that I think that having the ads is really going to reach more people to really know who is paying for the political bills. So I thank you for your gracious listening to us, and I urge you to support the bill to give people faith in their government again. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robert Packard. I'm from Penn Valley up in Nevada County. I'm a voter. I'm a voter that needs help in figuring out who's paying for the advertisements so I can understand how to evaluate them. So I think this bill takes care of that. I thank you for your consideration of that and for your patience with us. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Howard Mattis. I'm an Oakland voter. I've been using the internet before it was even named. I use the internet to buy things, sell things, maybe read a newspaper, but when I want to vote on something, it is too complex. What I want is a clear way when I see a proposition, who's supporting it, when I see a mail in the mail, who is behind it, so I can know why people are supporting it, and that really helps as a voter make a decision. So please support AB 249.
Sherry Fitzgerald, Vallejo, California. I traveled here today to ask you to vote for 249. Thank you.
I'm Bob Lord from San Jose, California. I agree with the comments that have made before me, so I will yield the rest of my time.
And I'll take it. Ralph Finley from San Jose. I've spent almost the last 2 years collecting petitions and signatures. We've collected over 100,000 signatures this year. This has overwhelming grassroots support. Please.
My name is Robert Cope. I'm from Sacramento. People don't want misleading ads, but they do want who's funding the ads. Thank you. This bill's needed.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Hagee from San Francisco. I have many neighbors who still are not using the internet. Please support AB 249. Thank you.
Lee Hammock from San Francisco. Everything that I've been thinking has already been said, except one thing, which is you can do better than neutral. Can't you? Come on. Really.
Hi, I'm Shalini Venkatesh from Santa Clara, and like most of the people here, I'm here to urge you to be bold, to do the right thing for the voters of California, and to support 249. Thank you.
Name is Graham Huey from Walnut Creek. I noticed that many political ads have false and misleading information. So by knowing who's actually paying for the ads will make us more an informed voter, and we can make the right decision. Thank you.
Dr. Esther Sistone from Yolo County, where all of my representatives have supported this bill, I'm very proud to say. And simply echo, this is needed. We do recognize as voters that whoever is funding the ads is actually has a much bigger voice than any of us as individuals, and that's critical in making an informed decision. Thank you.
My name is Richard Rose. I'm retired from Davis, California, and I ask that you please support AB 249 and support democracy in California. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Hilton from Sunnyvale, California. I'm frustrated, like many of other people, and you can help relieve that frustration by supporting this bill so that we have better information and more accurate information when we vote. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pat Schwinn. I took the train from Oakland, California this morning to say this is common sense. People need to know who's behind the ads, not these funny names that sound appealing but mean nothing. Help us help the voters make an informed vote. Thank you.
Donna Polis from Los Altos, California. Thank you for your work, which I'm sure is complex. I also support AB 249 so we can have informed voters. Thank you.
My name is Susan Wilkie. I'm from Sacramento. But I've noticed the current practices is almost like a theatrical event. It is like equivalent to a scrim in theater, which is a cotton cloth that's put before an object on the stage. It distorts. It can hide in plain sight the object. It can also mask, and you cannot see what the object really is until the scrim is removed. And I think that we need to remove the scrim so that we can see what is the object in front of us so that we can make a decision about how we want to vote. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Lorna Nero Berman from Davis, and I'm here to urge you to vote on transparency and fairness in our elections. Thank you.
I'm Dan Berman from Davis. I have the pleasure of being married to Lorna Inero Berman from Davis. Been involved in one thing or another politically since the early 60s, starting with, I don't want to go into it, but I'm a retiree and a member of SEIU 1000, used to be a staffer for the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers. I think it's very, very important to support this, and I hope you do support it as a commission. And I think if you do, maybe the governor will sign it.
Okay, thank you all for your patience. Louise Mailer from Sacramento, adding my presence in support of AB 249. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Samuelson from San Jose, and I want to thank you for your work. And and please support the Disclose Act. We've been working on it for 7 long years. Thank you.
Don Curry from Menlo Park. My argument is that having clear disclosure of who funds ads will improve the quality of the ads because they're now branded. So you put your name out there, the ads reflect on you. So I think it'll improve the political advertising to have this disclosure. Please support it.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Brady Wainio. I'm a citizen of the Earth, and I'm asking you to support this because the burning of fossil fuels is destroying all living beings' chance at a good life on this earth. And this bill will help us defeat fossil fuels and transition to a more sustainable energy system. Thank you.
Alice Eversole from Tracy. For the last 2.5 years, I've been working, getting signatures. We've gotten thousands in the San Joaquin County. On behalf of the people of Tracy, please pass AB 249.
Hi, I'm Bob Eversole from Tracy, and I come today with a hat in hand to ask you to please support 249.
Hi, I'm Carol Pinson. I'm from Martinez. I'm with various organizations, as you can see, and I want to tell you that joint Yale and Northwestern studies show that the United States is an oligarchy, and I would like you to strike a blow for democracy by supporting AB 249. Thank you.
Gloria Purcell, Belmont. Thank you for listening to us speak. I'm from San Mateo County, where Kevin Mullen and Jerry Hill are my representatives. Please do support 249. Thank you.
I'm Kathy Kermit. I'm a voter from Mountain View. Please support AB 249.
I'm Ann Harvey. I'm a voter from Oakland. I've been voting since the mid-'70s after getting an excellent California public education. And as far as commensurate benefit, I wonder if Prop 13 ever would have been passed if we had known who was behind that. Huge consequences, huge benefits for us to be able to vote the weighty things that we decide as voters with full information.
Hi, Pat Lang, Los Altos Hills. Please vote yes on 249. Thank you.
My name is Loretto Quevedo de Mandal from Milpitas, California, and I'd like to ask commissioners to please approve this, AB 249. I truly appreciate this opportunity because I came from the Philippines and we don't have this kind of process, so please approve it. Thank you.
Tom Shaw from San Jose, strongly urge you to support AB 249.
Thank you for giving up your lunchtime today. My name is Dwayne Jones. I live in a retirement community in San Jose. And let me tell you that being able to see the real advertisers, the people paying for the ads on TV will make a lot of difference in how my residents vote. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Keith. I'm a native Californian. I've lived at both ends of the state. I got my education here. And I don't think there is any legislation in the last 10 years that is more important than this bill. People everywhere in this state need to know who's funding what they're being asked to vote for. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kevin Wolf. I'm from Davis. I'm in support of this. I encourage you to do so. But I also want to ask you to not drop opposition on the Senate floor 45 minutes before the vote. That could have derailed this thing. You're responsible to get that kind of opposition in a more timely manner. Thank you.
I'm Mei-Ling Stephan from Sunnyvale. I became a naturalized citizen so that I can vote. Please endorse AB 249. Do what is right and fair for Californians, and the rest of the nation will also be grateful to you.
Hello, I'm Shirley Sholongoski from Pleasant Hill, and I'm the East Bay Coordinator for California Clean Money. I met in a grass tops meeting with 5 of our legislatures, and they thoroughly agreed that dark money in politics is a bad thing, and they all voted yes on the California Disclose Act, and 2 actually co-authored. So this is a very important thing. Dark money has been ruining our country, and I'm asking you to bring some civility back. Thank you so much.
I'm Nancy Neff from Palo Alto, asking for your support for the Disclose Act, which is the easiest thing I have ever collected signatures for.
Mary Gill from Stanford. I'm one of the 85% of Californians who want disclosure on ballot measure ads.
I'm David McKay from Davis. I just think as long as money is considered free speech, we should know, the public should be able to know who's shouting at us.
Mary Ratner, Menlo Park, California. Quite simply, the information age has become the misinformation age. Please support this.
PM Johnson, San Jose. Please support this bill. Thank you.
Al Chase, San Francisco. In the Citizens United case, of all things, 8 of the 9 justices cited the importance of disclosing the real funders of political ads. AB 249 meets that need. I ask you to endorse it. Thank you.
I'm Alan Brinker from Santa Clara, California. And if you stop and think about it, on a national basis, if we had a law like this and the Russians had to disclose in their Facebook ads, our news would be altogether different, right? And I know you don't like taking on extra work in your organization and the money's tight, but this one's too critical. So, if people had known that the recent ballot measure about the medical, raising the malpractice limit was totally, every dollar was paid for by the insurance company that handles that insurance, that election would have came out different. And measure after measure, we deserve to know an educated voter is the best voter. Thank you.
David Shurick, Orinda, California. I think the commission should support this legislation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shelley Carroll from San Francisco. I've done data entry for this bill and others before it for a while. I'd like you to support AB 249, which will help ensure fair political practices. Thank you.
Mary Helen Seeger, Solano County rancher, really asking for your support on this bill. Thank you.
My name is Jeb, no relation to Mr. Bush. You would be right, in case you haven't noticed already, that I wear this shirt with great pride. I was not old enough to vote in the United States when I joined the Peace Corps, because the voting age was 21, and I went and registered at the United States Embassy in Manila. Thanks to this shirt, I've met at least 2 other Peace Corps volunteers in the room right now, Brazil and Honduras, and there may be some more. I strongly encourage you to support AB 249. Thank you.
My name is Craig Dunkerley. I serve on the Santa Clara County Citizens Advisory Commission for Elections. I have late-breaking news of considerable import to the commission. I am the last person who will be giving public comment. Very briefly, cynicism is the enemy of democracy, and one of the things that these confusing committee names and the inability of voters to see who's really paying for them breeds that cynicism. It causes people to drop out. It causes people to say, to heck with it, they're all a bunch of crooks. The commission can go a long way towards helping to take a first step towards undoing that cynicism. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Our word is our bond. All right. They've heard it anyway. Our word is our bond. No.
He really did mean he was the last person.
Okay, questions from the commissioners for staff? Comments, questions?
Do you want to go first? I don't care. All right, I just want to make sure the things I think I know are in fact true. AB 249 was amended prior to the floor in the Senate? The committee? Help me out with the timing of the last slew of amendments.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where you want me to start, because this bill started as AB 14 in January of this year. At some point, AB 14 wasn't being heard by the policy committees in the Assembly, and I believe in late spring, AB 249, which had already crossed the Assembly into the Senate, was, the term of art we use is gutted and amended.
So it wasn't the Disclose Act?
It was not. It was an environmental protection bill.
Okay.
That was gutted, and then AB 14's language was then placed into AB 249. The Senate Rules Committee then, as it usually does, is take gut and amends and reassigns them to a committee. The Rules Committee was not making a decision on AB 249, I believe, for a couple of months. And at that point, the author of AB 249, Mr. Jimmy Gomez, left for Congress. He was elected in a special election earlier this year and left for Congress. And then in late August, Mr. Mullen was named the new author. And then on August 23rd, we received it received substantial amendment. And between August 23rd and 29th, 2 other amendments occurred during that time frame. In that time span, the bill went from the Senate Rules Committee to Senate elections, to Senate appropriations, to the floor in 7 days.
Okay.
A process that in regular order would usually take several months. And that's why we were, I guess, slow to react, because we have monthly meetings with y'all. And then it was subsequently passed from the Senate to the Assembly and then now on the governor's desk. So
Okay.
all of that is about 3 weeks of action, 3 to 4 weeks of action.
Okay, so it's been a fairly compressed period of time that the bill has been the bill that we're seeing before us right now.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Can you briefly describe what the latest package of amendments changed?
Yeah, between the version that we saw prior to August 23rd and the amendments that came in August 23rd was there were some sections added to the definition of advertisement. That would be section 6, 84501. And that would be, I believe, starting in that C3. All of that was new for the bill.
Yeah, what did it do?
Well, I guess that's the complexity part that we were talking about, is because it describes an earmarking process for primarily formed committees, earmarking money through primarily formed committees for state candidates and state ballot measures. Our staff has looked at this provision ad nauseum and trying to figure out what it is that they're trying to describe here and why it only describes primarily formed committees and no other committees. And so we have yet to really figure out. We have some literature from the sponsors that I think gives us some inclination of what it is they were aiming for, but literature from a sponsor, of course, is not legislative intent, so it's difficult for
Yeah,
us
but
to
if
really.
you're trying to solve a mystery, it's a piece of something at least.
It's something,
Okay.
yes.
Well, what do you, what
And then
what do
there
they
are
say they
there are
were
other
trying to do?
sections.
I
Yes.
mean, let's, I mean, I want to be a little, kind of like, a little systematic in this. What do they say that they were trying to do?
I'm a law student, and I think that's hearsay, so I don't want to try to describe what they believe they are trying to do, and so I think that may be a question for them.
All right. So there's the amendments to advertising and the earmarking from primarily formed to primarily formed that you just described. Okay, what else did the?
They added also section, let me see here, section 25, 84510, which is an enforcement section that deals with treble fines for folks who violate advertising disclosure rules. That enforcement and treble fine section was not in any previous versions of this bill, so that was new. And then
Let me stop you right there.
Yes.
So we do have treble damage is already available at 84510 for 3 times the cost of the advertisement. Is there a different scope to what treble damages apply to under this bill versus what we already have?
it does, and I may want to turn to Suki on that.
Sure. Rock out.
Well, they limit it a little bit in this bill to certain types of violations, and they take away prosecutorial discretion from our enforcement division when it comes to those. And they've described it as somewhat technical items, but I think that really should be left up to the enforcement division rather than being limited here in this language of the bill.
And also the language of the bill, under current law, a violation of Article 4 advertising disclosure, whether intentional or unintentional, would be subject to treble fines, of course, under the discretion that our enforcement division has. Under the new bill, only 2 sections of this new advertising scheme would be subject to treble fines for intentional or unintentional. The rest of the very detailed sections of the bill that deals with what should be featured in a type of advertisement would be only subject to treble fines under 2 elements that must be met, which is there must be intent to violate and for the purpose of avoiding disclosure. And so it as Suki said, very much narrows our ability and discretion.
But it's not just for technical violations, it's also for all of 84502, which is the new paid for by the strongest, most generic requirement under the bill. It would not allow. So you could not have that most basic requirement on here paid for by a political party or a candidate, and we would not be able to go after treble damages, which are probably some of the ones that would have cost the most money to run.
Okay. So, now moving along in the amendment package.
Okay. Another addition would be under Section 27 of the bill, 85704. They have added, let me take this out real quick. They add in the August 23rd amendment, let me see here, D and E of that section, which again describes a process of how committees are to report earmarked funds between certain committees. And so it pretty much describes a process that we require them to do now, but they are codifying the instructions in a way.
Okay.
And in some places, they are adding some new requirements, including requiring committees to add notations to their campaign forms. And there's one sentence in here that I think worries staff, which, and I don't know if now is the time to turn to it, if that's
yeah,
what you're
sure.
looking for.
Let's do it.
Commissioner Hayward. But under E3 of that section, I believe it's the second sentence. As they're describing this instruction, it says compliance with this paragraph satisfies the contributor's disclosure obligation under this title. So not just this article or a certain type of filing, but the entire title of the Political Reform Act. So that's a worrisome sentence because there's a lot of obligations under
So
the
we've
title.
got a provision this is in earmarking,
This is an earmarking, yes.
which is just a way of making sure that the true source of money is the source that's being reported.
Correct.
Okay, I'm
Which is similar to how it's required under existing law.
Yeah, which is, we have earmarking rules already, but yet we've now also got a provision in this particular statute that says that if this is done right, you're fine, regardless of what other things you might have needed to do and didn't do.
Under our current staff interpretation, yes, and there's no legislative clarification on that point.
And you haven't gotten clarification from authors, staff, or supporters, or Reddit, or the interwebs, or wherever else you might find clarification.
The speed at which this bill moved through the legislature, we're not 100% sure that everybody was examining it sentence by sentence like the commission staff was.
Fair enough, okay. Let's move on through the package.
I believe that was essentially the thrust of the
Okay.
changes on the August 23rd, and then most of the bill remained the same from prior versions, which under previous staff reports we had raised as concerns.
Yeah, so we've got a Disclose Act which enhances the Prop 208 requirements for advertising disclosure of true donors of $50,000 or more, which I think is something that at least most of the people who have been speaking to us this afternoon are interested in and concerned about. And then we've got, and was it in the bill previous to August 23rd that membership organizations that solicited earmarked contributions as part of due fee assessments, as long as the money solicited was under $500, it would be declared not to be earmarked? Was that part of the bill previous to the 23rd, or is that part of the earmarking stuff that we were talking about just now?
That was part of the bill, part of 249 prior to the 23rd amendments.
Okay.
Under AB 14, I believe it took a different shape in that it only carved out that exception with money was going to specified ballot measure committees.
Okay.
And that language was taken
But
out.
this earlier version as well was only to ballot measures, and then the last
There was a
amendment-
version of one of these two
Okay.
bills that carved out this
The
section
last
just
week
for.
amendments took out the limitation to ballot measures and
Okay.
allowed it to be to all
So this is
contributions.
a little why I wanted to do a step-by-step, even though I know it's probably tedious for some people, is that I think there's a lot of this that we're still thinking about, and the devil can be in the details, notwithstanding the fact that some of the broad things done in this act, in 249, resemble what the Disclose Act has been for a while. So I want to move away from that to what is your understanding, and maybe this is a question for, not for Philip, but for somebody, other legal person, but of the effect on us currently of the injunction in the California Republican Party, Democratic Party, and Orange County Republican Party case.
Okay, I can talk about that. So that case basically prohibits us from enforcing top donor disclosure against general purpose committees. And this bill will now try to require us to have general purpose committees disclose top donors on their ads.
Okay.
It'll be in different section numbers. That case specifically referred to certain section numbers that are currently in the act. So right now, we are enjoined from enforcing those provisions.
And general purpose committees include political party committees.
They do.
And I learned from a STIP also, from today's agenda also includes major donor committees, which aren't committees at all, they're just people. But be that as it may. The logic behind that, which I will just try to summarize, but tell me if I'm wrong, is that when you've got the committee, the upstart committee with the pretty name, that really is all about helping or defeating particular candidate or particular political committee, penetrating that veil and knowing who the top donors are is useful.
Yes.
When you've got a general purpose committee that may have perpetual life over decades, whoever the top 2 donors were in that last year may be an artifact or an accident, but may not tell you really something useful. It might be misleading. We don't know. I mean, it could be, it could not be. But you've got information with those perpetual general purpose committees with a long history of participation in politics that you don't have with the upstart committees. So I think that was the balance that the court was trying to.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Right? Okay, good. Yeah, I guess, I think I'm out of questions for staff for now. But thank you very much for all your hard work. I know it's been a busy time.
Commissioners, any additional questions at this time? And I know, Mr. Lang, you want to respond, and I'll let you respond, but I'm going to get through some questions first.
I have some questions, but I think I'd like to hear your response because that may answer my questions. Okay, yeah, sure, fair enough.
Commissioner Hatch. Do you have any questions for staff?
Yeah, I was looking at my questions.
Okay, why don't you go ahead then?
Actually, I was just trying to look up some of the previous bills, but I didn't get a chance to get to where I was looking, that where I think some of these issues you raised in previous bill numbers. Is that not true in your previous legislative reports at the time?
Right. Well, this year we raised the same concerns for AB 14, and then last year the commission unanimously.
Was
It
it
was
87?
under AB 700. Last year the commission unanimously voted to oppose AB 700, which had common provisions as this bill.
Are you sure that this, this treble damage thing is the language you think is going to prevent you from doing something that you can now currently do? And how big a deal is that? I mean, is it fixable with a trailer bill?
Well, anything's fixable with subsequent legislation. But our belief is that those elements of intentionality for the purpose of avoiding disclosure aren't currently elements in 84510 as it relates to violations of advertising disclosure.
And you're 100% sure of that?
I'm sorry?
And you're 100% sure of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also agree with Bill on that.
Okay.
For sure.
Thank you.
I'm Commissioner Hatch, if I could just add to that quickly. I was speaking to our enforcement division about that provision earlier. I think there's some discussion sometimes on the commission about sort of the cost of doing business and whether the fine, the $5,000 fine, is sufficient to deter people. And I think when you're looking at especially television advertising, you're running millions and millions of dollars worth of ads and potentially rolling back our ability to seek triple damages on advertising. There might be, and I'm not, I'm just offering this as a thought. I think that there is some sort of, this gives a bigger hammer to prevent sort of that analysis of this is just the cost of doing business on that type of advertising. And then I also think, I would argue at least that a penalty section like this is a deterrent to violating the act. So those are just some thoughts from enforcement.
But really, when you're doing, multi-million-dollar ad buys, none of the stuff we have in existing law or regulation adequately addresses that issue of how much does it take to make them want to think about it twice before they put up those deceptive ad campaigns. So I would love to see, somebody come to the fore with legislation to attack those issues next year. But I don't want to get in the way of a good idea that's, before us now. Thank you.
Additional questions?
Yeah, I want to go back to the treble damages thing. It sounds like a power struggle to me. It sounds like the voters want to do one thing, and we just don't like it. and we want to be able to assess treble damages. From what I'm hearing, I have no opinion on this. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like we want to be able to assess treble damages whenever we feel like it. And the voters are saying, hold on a minute. Or, yeah, okay, sorry. The legislature is saying, hold on a minute. We don't want you to do it whenever you feel like it. We want to tell you when to do it. And we want to tell you that we would prefer that it be when it's intentional conduct. So who are we to say that it should be whenever we want? I mean, why not let this be legislated?
I don't see a reason for specifically excluding the possibility of having treble damages in the bill. Because there could be a number of reasons why intent can't be proven, but there was intent. So I think it should be left up to the commission and the enforcement division to decide in those cases whether treble damages should be assessed.
Well, but isn't that the issue, right? I mean, isn't the issue that the legislature is saying, no, you must prove intent?
Yes, that is what they're saying.
Okay, so if that's what they're saying, then that's what they want, and they don't want to leave it open to the commission.
Yes, that's true.
To just decide. So it is a power struggle here.
It is a power struggle, and it just depends on what policy we want to advance on it.
And, oh, I'm sorry, please. Okay. What I was going to say, Commissioner, when you asked the existential question of who are we?
Yes.
I think I would think there's naturally a power struggle between the FPPC and the legislature because we are not like other executive branch agencies. We're an independent agency created by the voters and focused on this one particular act and the interpretation of that act. And the entire bill is filled with the legislature and the voters telling us what we should and should not do. And it's from our side of the table, it's staff's responsibility to flag where we think our discretion may perhaps be weakened or changed by the legislature's direction.
Sure, no, I get that. Yeah. I understand. But at bottom, I think this issue becomes the FPPC wants a lot more power than the legislature wants to give it under this bill. Would you agree?
I think it's above my pay grade.
Okay, well, so here's the problem I have with that answer is that somebody here has to answer this question. Somebody has to answer questions that we pose. I would say that you said this earlier. It's like, well, I don't want to interpret. I think I have difficulty when staff is making recommendations for staff to say, I don't understand what they're saying, and I'm not going to repeat what they're saying. I mean, we have to have some, unless you're saying it was, what they said to us was so muddled, incomprehensible, nobody could make sense of this. Okay, that's fair enough. And therefore, maybe because of that, we have a concern. But, I mean, we have people to answer that question, but I don't think it's appropriate for us to take a position one way or the other without being able to articulate what we understand is happening. So, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that because it concerns me that we would even dare to take a position without understanding what the other side is saying.
Right, and staff, thank you for that, Commissioner. Staff, as you know, we do our due diligence to figure out as much information as we can from any available sources, especially the legislature, and as it addresses legislation. For the issues that are listed within the staff memo, those are issues that we feel fairly confident we understand where they're going, although there is the catch-all of there's complexity, there's some uncertainty that comes with this bill because of our ability to interpret it and, through regulation, we don't know without a whole lot of legislative intent, it's hard to tell how they want us to interpret it. And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish.
Actually lost my train of thought because it's lunchtime and my blood sugar's
I'm
low,
so
but that's okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off.
That's okay, go ahead.
So I guess I see it as, we're going to take a position. Our position seems to be based on, in part at least, on our lack of understanding of what the other side is saying. We have a bunch of people in this room today who can probably answer our questions. And so I guess maybe what we do is, why don't you ask the question of what you don't understand? Let's see if we can get this answered in front of everybody before we take a vote.
Yeah, we're going to allow for a response period. We're just going to get through some of the questions, maybe compile the questions or issues, and then allow a response from, I'm assuming the sponsor will have some responses to some of the questions raised.
I've got a follow-up question on.
Do you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
Phil, I went back through a couple of years of legislative reports, and they're all pretty much the same format, and going back even to predate you, I think it's kind of been done that way a long time, but a lot of folks in this room are used to getting an attempted balanced report. That is to say, they give you who's the sponsor, who's the opponents, here's what the sponsors say, here's what the opponents say, you know, here's the points of technical issues that may or may not want to be raised by the members. You get some sort of sense of balance. What we don't get here for us to contemplate is that sense of balance. And it's institutional, it's not your fault. And I don't mean to denigrate you in any way, but going forward, I think we need to figure out a new way to, you know, report on legislation. Right, rhetorical.
Okay. Well, I will just say that I agree with the concerns raised by staff, and I appreciate your pointing out the concerns that have been, as you stated, ongoing for some time, whether it's AB 714 or 249. And I know that taking those positions or making those statements is obviously not easy in this room, but I do think that they are worthy concerns. And as far as what we're supposed to do with these, I think when we call something the Disclose Act, but then there are valid concerns of it narrowing our enforcement remedies, that's not disputable, it's narrowing our enforcement remedies. It's narrowing the circumstances when we can track earmarking, which we don't even really need to touch earmarking for the purposes of this issue, as we've talked about again and again, so I won't repeat all of that, because we do have you cannot make a contribution in the name of another for the purposes of avoiding disclosure. So we've got, it narrows enforcement, it narrows our circumstances of earmarking, it has, to say the least, and this perhaps goes to that, confusing language as to how we would implement this in the purpose. I understand there's been some justification provided for the $500 exemption for membership organizations, but I don't think the explanation is consistent with existing law, which already requires the membership organization to be noted on the campaign statements. And we can go through that in detail if we want. I will say that I also appreciate some of the comments from Trent and some of the others, which acknowledge the work California has done, because I think we can't lose sight in what we're trying to achieve is where we are already. I mean, California is often cited as having the toughest disclosure and enforcement laws in the country. And that's because of the work of the people at this desk who have worked very hard over the last 5+ years to get us here. I mean, as a result of that, for example, we have a prohibition on dark money in California. And now I know dark money is used loosely and often incorrectly, including today, because this bill does not touch on dark money, I'm sorry to say. This bill is about disclosure and contributions flowing, but that's different than dark money. And I know it's a detail that people don't like to talk about. But again, we have a regulation and a statute on dark money. It is nationally known as one of the strongest in the country, okay? Also, again, where are we today? We require top donors to be disclosed on ads, the top 2 donors, $50,000 or more. In addition, because of the work of this agency and the staff here, we also have our top 10 list, which is pretty amazing. I'm curious how many people who've stood up today have looked on our website at the top 10 list of ballot measures. A few. I'd encourage more of you, because what that top 10 list does is for every ballot measure in this state, that when a committee raises $1 million or more, they have to lift their top 10. You know what that showed in the last election? It showed who spent 80% of that $445 million. Just by looking at those top 10 lists that are out there already and required. And that was a lot of work to get there.
Excuse me, where is that?
It's on our website. Yep. I understand. I'm actually not here to debate right now. I've let everyone have an opportunity, and I would ask the same, and I will give you an opportunity to respond. I say all of that not to enter into debate that not more is not necessary, because more is necessary, and I get that. But it's also to say that, you know, when this group here is coming at this with the best interest in mind. We have to acknowledge what we have now, what's good about it, and when we have serious concerns and staff has serious concerns, I would hope that you would take those into consideration. And I don't feel over the last several years that they have been taken into consideration. I understand Mr. Lang's shaking his head, but again, this list here are things we've been talking about at least 3 years that I've been here, and I know for more for some of you. It's not that the goals aren't admirable. I 100% support the goals of the bill. But as has been said, the devil is in the detail. And there's some devils in this detail. So again, I thank staff and I share the concerns. Commissioner O'Darrow?
So I am the first to applaud the work that you guys do. There's no question about it. I don't think there's a single person in this room, every person who made their way from whatever city, whatever town they came to, not a single one of them criticized your work. So that's not the point. We applaud your work. But I do take issue with just because we are #1 in the nation, that's good enough. There is, and I recognize that Chair Remke herself acknowledged that more can be done. But so what? Why? How does that have anything to do with what we're talking about here? I agree that you have a level of expertise that I think that the public should listen to and trust, but not trust blindly. And by the way, if the public wants to debate, then I think that we should, debate. And if the public wants to change what we think is, we as a commission think is the way to go, then we should listen to that. And if the legislature has a different idea, we should listen to that as well. The whole, nobody doubts that you have the best interest at heart of California, but okay. I mean, I think this commission gets patted on the back quite a bit for the work that they do, and I think that's great. But that's, to me, is irrelevant. I think that we need to look at what needs to be done, what the legislature would like us to do. I absolutely value your opinion, but not because we should be done. But because you have something that is of value, but that doesn't mean that we don't also listen to the people and the legislature. So that said, and maybe we're not at that point, but I would like to, to get some answers. I would love to hear every question you have of something that you don't understand in this bill posed to the people in this room so that we can be done. Get the answers that you want and be done.
Okay, so I think that we've heard some issues of concern raised by staff about things we don't understand, some of the late amendments. So perhaps if you address those, that will resolve and we can move on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the questions, and I'll try to answer. Is that better? Okay, there we go. Thank you very much for the questions. I'll try to answer the questions that I remember. If I miss a couple of them, then I'm happy to answer other of them. On the as sponsor of the legislation, the purpose of the narrowing of the treble damages, it's not narrowing. Of course, you are allowed to, with intentional violations, you must prove intent. As staff correctly points out, this bill does have more complex formatting disclosure requirements than current law. And we did not want to, and the author did not want to cause potentially triple violations, which could get very expensive even for relatively small advertising actors if they were not intentionally, if they did not intentionally make it a mistake, if they made some inadvertent mistake in formatting, et cetera. And one of the things that was pointed out about that particular section is that intent is actually relatively easy to, should be actually relatively easy to prove. If somebody points out the error to the advertiser and says, your formatting is violating the law, you can do that. The commission can certainly do that sort of letter. Other members of the public can do that sort of notice also. And then if the advertiser continues to make that same violation, then obviously one can prove intent much more easily in that sort of circumstance. So it is meant, yes, it was meant by the sponsor, meant by the legislature, and I think the public would agree, many of whom have advertisements that they do in their small clubs and organizations, that they would not want to be subject to triple violations for potentially inadvertent errors in formatting. So that's why that particular change was made. It did specifically leave the triple violations without intent for the listing of the top contributors and for the listing of the independent expenditure disclaimers required in current law. So that's where that is. I will say that many in the legislature actually gave us a lot of a complaint about that this provision still allowed triple damages at all. I will point that out. That had to be defended against quite strongly.
You mean the people we regulate?
Yes, the people you regulate. And don't worry, we pushed back against and the bill passed with bipartisan support, as you saw. I wanted to point out on the general purpose committee lawsuit, the Republican and Democratic Party versus the FPPC that was referenced, looking at the actual judgment itself, the conclusion of the judgment itself, it did not enjoin all general purpose committees. It says, and I quote, and this is the final page in the conclusion, the preliminary injunction are hereby restrained and enjoined from enforcing California Code 84503 and 84506 against plaintiffs or similarly situated political party committees registered with the Secretary of State as general purpose committees, pending entry of a final judgment in the case. There is no reference in this case to all general purpose committees. I know that the commission itself afterwards decided to extend that preliminary injunction, which was never in fact ruled on. And our attorneys, people with the Brennan Center for Justice and Campaign Legal Center say in general that this is very defensible, but even when in light of Citizens United, but even in light of this case, which we believe actually is not really the law of land anymore, it did not enjoin you from required listing of top funders on general purpose committees in general, only political parties as per the wording of the conclusion of the case itself.
Commissioner Hayward.
general purpose committees apart from the parties as, political parties as parties in that lawsuit?
No. It was the Democratic Party, the California Democratic Party, the California Republican Party, and the California Republican Party of Orange County. All the examples there that the judge agreed with were parties.
So there's no call for talking about, in that order, general purpose committees apart from parties, because there's no general purpose committees apart from parties before the court, right?
Political parties were listed as being general purpose committees themselves, so that's probably why they did it that way. But there was no example of a general purpose committee raised in this case that was not a political party, and the conclusion enjoined it from similarly situated political party committees.
Commissioner Hayward, I believe Suki could add some light to it. It's kind of a complex factual situation that happened because I believe the commission actually issued some sort of resolution that was expansive.
If you don't mind, I'd like to hear from staff.
Yes, please.
Awesome, thank
So
you.
yeah, we issued a resolution that was expansive that included general purpose committees. That was then submitted to the court. The court issued a stipulation for judgment of dismissal on this case, and that stipulation specifically applies to general purpose committees and enjoins us from enforcing those sections against them.
And that's what we're under right now, right?
Yes.
And so that's the general, what I would call the law of the land, wouldn't you? Maybe? No, okay, thanks, thank you.
So we asked for it?
We didn't ask for it. It was something that we agreed to, and then the court ordered. Does that
Ask for it then.
Well, the plaintiffs asked for it, and the court made a decision, and then we decided to go ahead and stipulate to it.
Yet it wasn't appealed. Mr. Lane,
so-
would you like to continue?
Yeah, so I think that in general, the point that we believe is we have a considerable outside expert opinion that believes that these requirements are quite defensible. The Brennan Center for Justice on a previous version that had the similar sorts of requirements said that the California Disclosure Act stands on a firm constitutional bedrock and is worthy of support. So yes, there is very much a chance and possibly a likelihood of legal cases afterwards, but that's not a reason to not go forward with important improved disclosure legislation, we would argue. I'm trying, maybe rather than going, those seem like the two most important things I wanted to clarify. I'm happy to answer any
I think just
other
the two
questions.
sections that I heard that you could perhaps provide a reasoning for that were added late were under the advertisement definition, subdivision C3 under top contributors. I heard that mentioned.
Thank you.
It was unclear. I, in fact, thought when I first read this that the top contributors only applied to primarily formed committees as a result of this language.
No, the intent is top contributors applies to any committee, including general purpose committees, but not political party committees, partially due to this case. The intent, however, is to expand top contributors, not only be the top 3 of $50,000 or more instead of just the top 2 of $50,000 or more, but to require earmarking tracing similar to current earmarking for particular candidates to also affect who may be seen as a top contributor when those funds are passed through one or more layers of primarily formed committees for the same specific candidate or ballot measure. That is the intent there. That is the heart of what all of these people care about, is making sure that if a true contributor, an earmarked contributor, makes earmarking, if their contributions are passed through one or more of these primarily formed committees, which is mostly what ballot measure funds are spent on, that they will potentially be one of the top 3 contributors to be displayed on the ad if they are one of the top 3 contributors at the end of the day. That is the intent.
And just since we're right on that provision, and the intent behind subdivision C2B, I think it is, and I think this is also a new provision, regarding the indemnity you're going to be providing to people involved in the earmarking? What was the thought there? If we're earmarking just because I received it, can you explain that
Yeah,
provision?
so the provision, yes, thank you. C2B, committee receiving the earmark contribution may rely on the information provided pursuant to A. The reasoning there is that a committee that receives a contribution should be able to rely upon the information that the other committee provided to them. That if that committee deceives them, does not provide full information, it is not the fault of the committee that received the money.
But what if the committee that received the money is part of the earmarking scheme?
That's an interesting question. However, in that case, certainly the committees that gave the funds will be fully responsible for providing the false information.
But even if the committee that received it was part of the scheme, this provision provides them immunity, indemnity.
That I could not speak to myself. The intent of this provision was to ensure that committees would not be subject to violations or fines if they were themselves deceived or got improper information, which otherwise they could be liable to having.
But that's not what that says, right? Because, I mean, again, in an earmarking, it's usually not just one bad apple. It is the process of funneling the money through.
Well, this provision, of course, does not apply to the other 85704 earmarking sections for purposes of disclosure. It applies to the earmarking rules for purposes of who is displayed on ads. So it does not.
That's that very narrow treble damage issue now. And I think the other section that was added late.
I'd like to, while he's still on that section.
Sure. Go ahead, Commissioner Hatch.
Thank you. Isn't it true that in the bill, you take what is a single focus section for earmarking and you expand on it and provide sort of in an illustrative way multiple paths that would cause you to be guilty of earmarking?
Yes.
And there's multiple tests, and it's not that you have to meet all tests. It's one or the other. Whichever one snags you, then you're guilty of earmarking.
That's precisely correct.
Okay, so it's actually an improvement over what we have now.
We believe so. I know staff has raised concern about the particular paragraph that does require express consent. We believe that is one kind of earmarking when there actually is express consent, but the other paragraph 2, does not require it. And the very fact that it does not mention it, I'm not an attorney, but our attorneys say that the very fact that it explicitly does not mention it where paragraph 1 does, shows that that paragraph does not require express consent.
But Mr. Lang, on that point, because you keep focusing on the language of express consent, staff has also pointed out now, again, I think for a couple years, the added language of specifically identified committee, ballot measure, or candidate. And again, this goes to those who actually prosecute these cases and their ability to prosecute cases and the circumstantial evidence in which they often rely. Existing law says any particular, which again requires a certain focus on this isn't just money I'm throwing out there, it has a direction. But to add the language specifically identified, in addition to on that other paragraph, the express consent. Now, I understand that you may dispute that that has a concern again, and that's why I went off on I rely on staff who has been doing this and who is the only people in this room responsible for prosecuting these cases when they tell me that that's a concern. And I guess because this concern has been raised for several years now, I'm a little bit lost why, if this is a disclose act with the purpose of stopping earmarking and increasing transparency, why those words wouldn't come out, even if you disagree that they're problematic. We've got a strong group here saying it is problematic. Why wouldn't we just take them out? They're not there now.
The reason is we talked to a number of outside experts about if they thought there was any particular difference between any particular candidate. or specifically identified candidate. Nobody outside of staff raised
How many of those
concerns.
people you talk to prosecute cases?
Well, we did talk to people who prosecute cases. Your staff, we requested a single hypothetical example, even a hypothetical example where the difference between any particular candidate or specifically identified candidate would be a potential problem.
And
They
we've
were not
given you
able to
those.
provide one.
Yeah, oh, no, we have.
And we actually said we would be able to, I'm sorry. We actually said we would consider amending the legislation or requesting amending the legislation if they came up with any problems, and they did not.
Well, because I've talked about this provision for several years with staff and their concerns, I know that examples have been provided. But again, I guess my issue is, if they're saying there's a concern, and if you want the best Disclose Act you can get, why wouldn't you take those words out? I feel like this is part of the negotiation that happened, which we weren't part of, which shows some concerns may be legitimate here.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, Darren.
Yeah.
If I can
Well,
add.
let's see if
Yeah,
Mr. Lang-
Sorry, go ahead, Trent.
If we had heard concerns from outside experts, and we actually did talk to outside experts who had prosecuted cases on this formerly from the commission, then we might have considered it to be a problem, or if you had come up with hypothetical examples where it would have been a problem, but we did not hear any hypothetical examples. So that is why we did not change the legislation, or suggest changing the legislation.
Mr. Young.
So Mr. Lang and I have gone back and forth on this particular issue, at least for me ad nauseum, to the point that my recollection, and I know it's sensitive to hearsay, but I'm gonna go ahead and break that rule. My recollection of conversation is at one point, Mr. Lang and I just got to a point where he didn't believe there was a difference in the terms specifically identified committee and particular committee. And my response to him was, if there is no difference, then just use our term and drop the issue. And it hasn't been changed yet.
I have a question about that, if I may.
Commissioner O'Darrow.
Thank you. So did you provide a hypothetical?
I believe in previous years we have. In this year, I think this.
What was it?
Do you want to?
Yeah.
Somebody, anybody, what was it?
I can give several. But, for example, when you say we asked, and I think this might jar your memory, Mr. Lang, when we gave the hypothetical, because we asked that you include the word, if you're going to keep specifically identified committee ballot measure candidate, we said, could you include the word race? Because even if you're not identifying a candidate, you are talking about a very hot contest where, again, circumstantial evidence has shown that members of the legislature will say, well, we need to get as much money as we can into that race in Southern California to flip the supermajority, whatever it may be. But again, it's spoken in code about what we're talking about. Another example that I know has been given, at least in my presence, is when we're talking about ballot measures. There are, for example, there was Prop 1 and 2 or 30, there's propositions that go together. And you don't have to say Proposition 1 or 2 specifically identified. You say the subject matter of. If you give to us, we will be sure that the money makes it to stop cap and trade. We will be sure that the money stops increasing taxes. And again, those are just some examples, but this is again how cases are prosecuted and how the evidence turns out. And I just believe that there's more behind the resistance to taking this out than meets the eye, but maybe I'm wrong, and then I'm just frustrated because, again, we've asked for it. It's not an existing law, so why add it? But that's...
And I do very much recollect those discussions, and actually we were considering and actually drafted language to include or specifically identified race, in which we thought was a good idea, but you can't always put everything that you want into legislation that there is. But the experts that we talked to after that did not see any difference themselves between any particular candidate or specifically identified candidate. And this year, when we were at a state in the legislation when it would have been, we would have been best potentially able to make that sort of change if we had received a hypothetical example from staff that we could use to argue for why. We specifically requested it, and they were not able, they did not provide us with one.
Seems like a distinction without a difference. You have particular, it modifies committee, ballot measure, or the candidate. I mean, it seems like it's perfectly adequate.
That's what we were told.
But I think the last provision that a question was asked that was added late in the game were provisions on 85704, D, subdivision D, and E.
One second. Sorry about that. Let me find it. Okay, so what was the specific question about D?
No, I think that was one of the areas where staff was asked. We said that there was confusion as for the purpose to add this all in, including under E3, compliance with this paragraph satisfies the contributor's disclosure obligations under this title, which is obviously the entire act.
So in general, the reason for adding these sections was to provide greater clarity for earmarking rules. There were questions raised by stakeholders for examples of what if a committee only gave a portion of its earmarked contributions to another committee in an earmarked fashion, which ones should be done. That's why the language about using a reasonable accounting method was added. There were potential concerns about what if a committee were to tell two different committees the same earmarked contributor that they thought had a popular name as opposed to another. So a lot of these things were added to add that sort of level of specificity.
As for that sentence, though?
It was meant for compliance obligations under this title. I cannot actually speak exactly why it says under this title as opposed to under this article. I don't believe that would have any negative effect, but I cannot speak to that at this moment.
You don't believe it would have any effect in what? I'm sorry.
I'm not sure. I cannot speak to whether or not it's saying under this title as opposed to under this article or under this section would make any difference. That I cannot do.
Well, the article is the advertising article, which is what you used when you talked about the remedies.
Yes.
And then this is new language added, and the title is the entire
Yes,
act.
I understand that.
So you could see the difference, right?
I can see the difference and just.
Yes. What actual differences are you concerned about that it would
I'm
make?
concerned that it says compliance with this paragraph, meaning this one issue of reporting, when you're earmarking funds, meets your obligations under the title as to all reporting obligations you may have, which are much broader than this one provision.
Yes, I cannot immediately myself see where that would have negative ramifications. One thing I will say is that we have offered to Mr. Ung that we would be happy to engage in any cleanup legislation. If there are things like that where you can point out that there could be negative ramifications, we'd be happy to work with our authors, and authors also expressed willingness to do so. If I don't believe that would make it an issue, but if it is, then we would be happy to work with you on it.
Okay, thank you. Any other further questions for Mr. Lang?
Well, so I do.
Commissioner O'Darrow?
So has your question about the complexity of the earmarking process that you didn't understand, has that been answered?
No.
Okay, could you just pose the question so that it can be answered, and hopefully we have an answer for you. Not me.
Okay.
Not me. I'm not touching that one.
At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Trish, who has a question.
Okay.
Hi, so under 85704C, $500, less than $500 earmark rule, I just want to make sure I understand what you said earlier. If a union or a membership organization receives contributions from its members earmarked to go to a candidate or measure or another committee of less than $500, when the union or entity is reported as the source instead of the actual members, I think you mentioned that they would be subject to the contribution limit as opposed to the actual source of the contribution?
I think one thing that some people have been confused about is the difference here between contributions and that versus dues, fees, assessments, and similar payments, which is what Section C applies to. The intent, and I believe that the language of this is that any voluntary contributions where somebody says, here's $400 and gives it to their union or to their membership organization, make sure it goes to this candidate or anything else. That would not be, that is not a due, that is not a fee, that is not an assessment. That would be subject to the normal contribution rules.
Well, wait, I have a question then, because then what, in that very same section, why does it say dues, assessments, fees, or similar payments for the purpose of making contributions or expenditures?
That is if the membership organization, if the money was, if a union, for example, puts on an assessment of all of its members and says, we are asking, we're putting on this assessment of $100 for everybody to fight Proposition 99. That would be an assessment for the purpose of making contributions or expenditures for that particular proposition. That would clearly be considered earmarked. And under this provision, they would be, the union itself would be the one that would be considered earmarked, because that being an assessment under $500 would be excluded from earmarking, so that the union itself would be the one that is earmarked and therefore traced along the path.
Right, in that regard, if the union then gave it to, say, a political party to then give to the committee for or against something, they would still be required to double disclose the earmarking so that you can see the path that the money.
That's right. The union itself would be, not its thousands and thousands of individual members who are assessed.
Right.
On the other hand, if an individual union member or anybody else contributes, says, hey, here's $400, give it to this candidate, give it to this measure, that's not a due, fee, or assessment. That's a regular contribution. Or even if the union or the other membership organization says, hey, everybody, there's this important union, this important measure that we want to fight, click here to donate, that is also a voluntary contribution. It's not a due, it's not a fee, it's not an assessment. This is, that would also be not excluded under this provision, because it's not a due, fee, and assessment. Right. So those contributions would be considered earmarked if they're otherwise considered earmarked. It's only the mandatory ones.
Under current rules, those, the source of those dues that are contributed would be the individual donor. So in this case, the intermediary, under our current rules, would be subject to the contribution limit. So if those funds were given to a candidate who had a $1,000 contribution limit, that's the only amount that could be transferred over? Is that what you're?
What we're saying is yes, because the individual members are not being considered earmarked, it is the membership organization itself, it would be subject to that contribution limit, because it is considered the source of the funds as being earmarked, as opposed to
the small contributor PAC limitations.
Yeah, small contributor PAC contribution, yes. As opposed to if they're allowed.
Sorry, Commissioner, we didn't hear your question.
It really wasn't a question. I said that money would be subject to the existing law, small contributor PAC limitations.
Yes.
Pure and simple, just as it is now, as it would be then.
If it was given to a state candidate. In this case, I think Trish may be talking about a local.
Or whatever.
Well, local candidates have smaller contribution limits.
We're talking about a limit on how much the committee can receive.
So that's why she said $1,000 as she was talking about
Which committee
potentially.
are you talking about now?
I was just using a local candidate, for example, subject to a $1,000 contribution limit, just a general example.
Except that the small contributor PAC limitations are for state races.
Right. This provision applies to state and local candidates.
It doesn't just apply to small contributor committees.
I beg your pardon?
This provision doesn't just apply to small contributor committees.
Well, there's the principle and then the label. The membership organization is the entity, and they are defined under the law, if they act in accordance with those provisions, to be a small contributor committee. That is, they don't take big contributions that would make them no longer qualified.
The point of this provision in cases of candidates was to ensure that the membership organization itself is considered earmarked and therefore subject itself to whatever contribution limits there are, be it state candidates as a small contributor committee or in a local race, whatever limits that membership organization would normally have, if it's earmarked, that it be the one that's subject to it. That without this provision, there's actually the possibility that a membership organization could do an assessment on all of its members, 1,000 members, $100 a pop, $200 a pop, give that $200,000 and say, it's not our money. It's the money from the individual members that individually earmarked it. Yes, we're the intermediary, so it's going to be noted on the record. We understand that that is noted in the record, but the contributor source, due to the earmarking rules, is considered to be whoever is earmarked. And we believe that it's much more valuable for the membership organization. And in the case of contribution limits, it should be the membership organization that is, in the case of dues, fees, and assessments, that is responsible for abiding by those limits.
Okay, Commissioner Hayward?
Okay, I think this is a question for both of you, because this is something I hadn't played out in my mind until about now. Maybe it's the low blood sugar, I don't know. So you've got a membership organization that has done an assessment, and the assessment is for $499. And so it falls within this, and under this proposal, that payment is considered to be not earmarked. Does it show up at all in our disclosure regime? Does it show up on somebody's report?
Yes.
I'm not asking you.
Okay.
Thank you. With respect. Because if it's not earmarked and it's the product of an assessment, what is it? Go. Trish, go. Go.
Are you asking under current rules or the proposed?
I am asking under, under current rules, we know what the proposal declares this assessment to be not earmarked. Not reportable as earmarked, not forwarded to the recipient as earmarked, but just not earmarked. If it's the product of an assessment with a membership organization and it's under $500 and it's not earmarked, what is it? Is it anything?
I think that's a question for.
Our understanding is that it would be, that the membership organization would have to do it in its reports just as under current law as a contribution to itself. All we're saying is that it's not considered earmarked, and therefore it doesn't have to be passed along all those thousands and thousands of individual
So the
members.
one thing we've lost in the public information regime is that piece of information that shows that that was a contribution to the organization to go to somebody else.
Except that the organization itself would show as earmarked. And so the organization itself, if they gave to another committee and said, here are these earmarked funds from this membership organization, they're going to say, we are the earmarker.
Well, but I find that a little misleading, because if you've got $499 that's earmarked for somebody, it's not really yours. You're an intermediary for somebody else. Where if you're making a contribution as a membership organization of funds that you have discretion over, then it is correct to say that you're the source of those funds. But I'm not persuaded this helps. Let's put it that way. Thank you.
I'll just say that I guess we would argue that in that case, because it was an assessment, I would agree with you if it was a voluntary contribution, but because this was an assessment
For the
that the
purpose of
membership organization
contributions and
did.
expenditures.
Yes.
And I would just add that
Yes,
people
that
can
they-
opt out.
And
so-
people can opt out, yes.
Okay, any further questions for Mr. Lang? Did you have a further question?
No, it's a waste of time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any additional comments or questions, or is there a motion?
I have a question.
Point of order.
Oh.
Oh, if it's a question, I'll wait.
No, go.
What's
Do your point of order.
This item is a part of the staff reports. And so it's not properly agendized for a motion on any of these bills. And it's also, it's a violation of the Bagley-Keene Act to move and act on this measure. And not only that, but it's been the longstanding practice of this commission that every time they have a staff legislative report that they want to take action on, they remove it from this executive staff report and make it a separate action item. For whatever reason, the chair didn't do that this month. She had a recommendation.
This isn't my report or my recommendation. Thank you.
You set the agenda, correct?
I'm not going to get in a debate with you right now. This is not my report or my recommendation. This is the executive staff report.
My point of order is any motion to move for or against would be a violation of Bagley-Keene and our longstanding practice of fully disclosing to the public that we intend to take action on something.
Well, that is not my understanding. It has been noticed, but I will leave it to General Counsel. Unfortunately, our Bagley-Keene expert had to leave, and we have to postpone our training. But I don't know if, Jack, you want to respond to the issue? But I will say, don't even know if there's a motion.
You asked for a motion. I think
I
that was
just
the
mean, yeah.
response.
Oh, I
I think
can't
that was,
even-
Point of order isn't a
yeah.
Before a motion is made, I made my point of order. I'd like it disposed of.
I'd point out that we did notice this for discussion. As we can see, there's plenty of people that showed up to discuss this item. So it was out there for the public. The public has a seat at this table, and if we can discuss it, we can take action on it.
And I would add that the recommendation is to take action.
My recommendation, take action.
Is that a ruling?
That's my recommendation.
So I have a question about that. So what if those who really know Bagley-Keene read our agenda and said, oh, I don't have to go because it's not an action item?
Exactly.
All I can offer is at this point, we can see that there's been lively debate on this, and I think at this point, it's safe to assume that we can take action on it.
But would you agree that if even one person was misled by the agenda, then this would be a violation of Bagley-Keene?
No, I don't think the way it was put out there was misleading. So if a person was misled, we can't help that. We're just trying to do the best we can. I think under Bagley-Keene, we just have to give notice that we are going to discuss an item.
But that's not what we did, Jack. We just simply left it in the executive reports, which is not an action item. It's for us to read and maybe ask questions about. And every single hearing that we've had for going back over 2 years, the only times that we've taken action on a recommendation on a legislative report is when the legislative report was not appearing as a part of the executive staff report and was a separate item with its own agenda.
Yeah, and as somebody pointed out under the Bagley-Keene, items shouldn't be labeled as discussions or actions unless that's all you want. So in other words, we don't have to label something an action item in order to take action on it.
So if we have a concern about whether we're violating Bagley-Keene, and we don't have the expert here, that should inform how we vote on this motion. Right.
I think we have the advice of our general counsel.
Oh, but then couldn't our general counsel do the Bagley-Keene training instead of the AG?
They do it for many state boards and
That's not my
commissions.
question, though.
Sure, we can have the, but that's not what we thought was best, discussing the issue with our general counsel. Again, I think we're getting a little off subject here. There's been a
Of course we
point
are.
of order.
I asked for a ruling by the commission on my point of order by vote.
I don't even know how to do
Is my point of order well taken or not? Yes or no? The majority rules.
Call roll. Yeah. Do you have a? I didn't
Yeah, call the roll. Sasha?
Commissioner Adaro?
I'm not sure I know how to respond here, other than I have a concern. Yes, I have a concern that we are violating Bagley-Keene. And given how much we have heard about Bagley-Keene from the chair and what a grave concern this has been, such that we are now supposed to be receiving a discussion by the AG, not our own counsel, about Bagley-Keene and what's right and what's wrong. Yeah, I'd be afraid. So yeah, your point of order is well taken.
Commissioner Hatch?
Yes.
Commissioner Hayward?
I question that we've had this discussion anticipated and letters sent to us for easily 2 weeks. I mean, the agenda packet goes out 10 days before a meeting, so that, and I think we all knew sometime before then. And to the extent that there was a technical deficiency in notice, I think that the people who get the agenda packet and read it should have some responsibility to raise it before 1:50 in the afternoon of a meeting that started at 10, that brought a lot of good people across the bridge and over the hills and through the woods to talk to us about the Disclose Act, which, by the way, I'm not really sure is the Disclose Act you all think it is because of the late amendments, but let's set that aside. So I would think that, at this late hour, such objection is waived. And so, no, I don't think it's well taken.
So that's a no?
That's a no.
Chair Remke?
No.
Point of order is tied.
Okay, I go back to, is there a motion on,
Yes. I move that we endorse the Disclose Act, AB 249.
is there a second? Okay, that motion fails. If there's no other motion, we will not have a recommendation on that, so we'll move forward. Believe it or not, there's still the issue remaining, if there's any other questions regarding the executive staff reports.
I do.
Commissioner O'Darrow?
Oh, I guess for you. So in our last meeting, we talked about the budget.
Yes.
And I posed a question, and I'm wondering if you have the answer to that.
Could you refresh my recollection as to the question?
Yeah, it is wait, I bet it's in the agenda. In the minutes. But it was about that line item that had that larger number. Hold on, I'll find it.
I don't have the answer. I will get it to you. I'm sorry. I will look back at my notes and we can I will get you the answer.
Okay,
I
thank you.
apologize.
No, that's okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? We're still in a meeting. Excuse me? Thank you. Any other, okay, any other questions or comments on the executive staff report? Okay. I think so. Hearing or seeing none, that will be submitted. I move to adjourn.
Do you want to make a note
Oh,
about
I'm sorry. I have the public, the Attorney General's office was unable to stay to this late time. They were unaware that it would run this late, so we have to reschedule our presentation.
Oh, I have a question about that.
Okay?
So Commissioner Hatch had made a written request per our rules to have a particular agenda item on the agenda, and it was unilaterally decided that that agenda item was not going to be put on the agenda. So I want to discuss how that can even happen. And yeah, so 2 points. One, I want to discuss how that can even happen. So I'd like to talk about that.
So the request, just so the public and the record is clear, is that Commissioner Hatch requested that the commission's statement of governance principles be put on an agenda for an action item, to make a motion to create a subcommittee to do research and issue a report as to whether or not the governance principles needed to be updated, and if so, with recommended changes. I, as the policy has been, and pursuant to those governance principles, I don't have them right in front of me, but the chair, as has been the practice, sets the agenda, prioritizing issues and time and what we can fully staff and/or discuss in any one meeting. I said I would obviously put that on, and I still intend to, but
You said you'd put it on for September.
right, I know I said I'd put it on for September. Let me finish, please.
Okay. You were going someplace else with it.
I'm going to the point where, meanwhile, and during the last, I would say, 4 to 5 months, several questions have been raised from commissioners regarding protocol, procedures, Bagley-Keene, and the idea of creating a subcommittee without discussion as to proper protocol. I determined, pursuant to my delegated authority, that we should have training first on how we would conduct such a process and answer other questions that have been raised. And as I told the commissioners, my intention was to put on the statement of governance principles on October, as I told all of you. So the idea was that we'd have the training this month, and the following month, that motion and that request would be put on the October agenda.
Are we still going to be in October for my motion?
Absolutely.
Okay, that was my second question. I just didn't understand why the two couldn't happen in the same month.
Well, it just seemed, because of the way the agenda was set up, where I thought it would be smartest to have training at the end so that we could get through the public matters without having everyone have to sit through that we would be discussing an item that I thought best that we have training and ask the AG's office about some of those issues, including the creation of the subcommittee and the public notice on those issues, and that things that I believe will come up and should be addressed. So, again, the only issue was, can we get the clarification on procedure before we go down a path? So that's the reason on the timing.
So are we going to have both on the agenda next time?
That will be my goal. It depends on the AG's office.
Right, assuming the AG is available, then we would have the Bagley-Keene discussion first, and then the agenda item.
That would be my goal.
Okay.
And
So then, That could have been done today, right?
What if they don't show again?
Again, it's now 2:00.
No. That wasn't, no. You misunderstand my question. The question is, it could have been agendized in that way today, Bagley Keene, and then the discussion, right? Because that's what we're going to.
No, that is my point of pointing to the clock, because again, as several people had requested, there were 50-something people waiting for us to discuss that issue. Again, I was trying to move through the agenda and then have us have that training separately. So again, to have had a 45-minute to an hour training, which could be longer based on questions from commissioners, my concern was then, now obviously we'd be into the 3:00 time with members of the public waiting for us to get through that. So again, that was the reason I did not do it that way today.
Except that really wasn't what was planned, right? You were going to limit everybody to just a name and a location, and so that wouldn't have happened.
Is there a question or a comment?
Would that have happened?
I really don't understand the question.
Taking a page from Commissioner Hatch's book, I guess that was rhetorical. So the point is, we're going to have both on the agenda in
Yes.
October.
Yes.
Excellent.
We believe that the AG's office is available. They
That's great.
double check their calendars, but it sounds like they will be available on that October date.
Could we ask that that training be number one on the agenda, and that we notice to the public that the regular order won't start until X time, rather than, so they don't have to rush here, get here at 10 o'clock, and then find out that they're going to have to wait an hour for that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Related question.
Yes.
Is it a violation of Bagley Keene to present to staff questions I have about the application of Bagley Keene that could be passed on to the AG's office that would then allow them to more efficiently gauge what they want to talk about with us?
I'll leave that to Jack.
Because I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, there's been stuff that's been bothering me from the first, and it would be really nice to be able to
I would love to take
signal that.
instruction and give it to Ted.
So we just email
Yes.
you?
Yes.
Yeah, you can, yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Just a clarification. So we can email you questions and you'll pass them on?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Is it accurate to say from the last discussion you had with Ted in preparation for this, the issue is just not to engage all commissioners? They could contact you directly regarding issues?
Say that again.
I'm just saying the emailed question should just go to you,
It
not
just-
to the full commission. Is that the issue that?
I think so, just one-way communications. I'll get them to Ted.
Wait, why are questions without answers?
Well, we can ask all this when Ted's here.
Well, but no, but you know, but here's the thing. We have perfectly capable counsel. And so I have a question, because I'd like to know what the questions are that the commissioners ask. So why are questions that don't beget any answers, just here is what I would like to hear about, why does that violate Bagley Keene?
I don't think it does. Sometimes when I'm having conversations with each of you, it's just, I think more out of an abundance of caution, and somebody doesn't jump in and start talking about the topic, and we all of a sudden have this serial meeting that's possible. Now, if it's something, I think that if you want to see the questions and we can do it in a way that
Nobody answers.
okay,
could
I
just
don't
all agree
see any
to-
problem with that, so.
We could just all agree to not answer.
Yeah.
Well, if you want
Yeah.
to, maybe email Jack, the individual questions you have. He can do two things: forward them to Ted so that they can be addressed in the training, and then maybe aggregate them and then recirculate them to the full commission as a informational.
But the other thing is like, if somebody has already asked it, I don't want to ask it, and I don't want to bother, and I don't want to take the time. So why don't we just CC each other in all the questions, and we all agree not to answer them, and then we're done?
I think as long as we agree not to answer, any way you want to do it is fine, so.
That would be most productive, because if I see the questions already on there, I don't want to, you know.
All right, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Darrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Hatch?
Aye.
Commissioner Hayward?
Yes.
Chair Remke? Yes. Motion passes.